This is the Monday, November 6th Barrington Select Board meeting. Call to order, roll call.
Hardikoff present.
Gibson here.
And Shrek here.
Scotia here.
Capiello here. And before we do the pledge of allegiance, I would like to take a moment. One of our longtime Barrington residents, Dawn Hatch, has died recently. Dawn had many contributions and accomplishments here in Barrington. She was a member of our first budget committee. She was a land use volunteer from 1970s until 2010, first as a volunteer, then a part-time, then a full-time land use clerk. She recorded minutes for conservation, planning, and zoning. I mean, God bless anyone who does minutes for that many committees. Served on the planning board and the zoning board, very involved in zoning reform, which created the Village Town Center zoning districts. She was Citizen of the Year in 2012 and sat on the select board for 2 terms, 2014 to 2020. So I would just like to have a moment of silence and as we recognize Dawn and her contributions. Well, thank you. Let's move ahead with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please all rise. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda review and approval.
I have
Madam
one
Chair.
item.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
On the consent agenda, I would recommend we drop or not consider G separately.
So to remove it from the
Right.
consent agenda, and we'll put that under old business, new business,
Add new business, I see.
and Mr. McGuire.
So we have the select board recently authorized $10,000 towards a police computer equipment project from the police equipment capital reserve. The actual cost is $10,543.26. So we have a request from the police chief, which you all have a printed copy of, to increase that appropriation from the capital reserve, $543.26, to cover the costs.
All right, we'll move to put that in the consent agenda.
So I would second the motion to move G to new business and to add H, which is the new amount of the $10,540.
Second.
Roll call.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gibson, aye.
And Shrek, aye.
Scotia.
Capiello, aye.
Jim, microphone.
Next, we'll be looking at public comment. Is there any public comment here in the audience? If there is, I'll read our instructions for public comment. Doesn't look like there's anyone here in person. Is there anyone online? Looks like not. There will be a second public comment at the end of the meeting. Next on the agenda is public hearing and invited guests. Is there anyone from the school board here tonight? Doesn't look like it. Then I would like to invite our guests from Stratford Regional Planning Commission, Jen Krizik, the executive director. Would you start? And then we have our 2 representatives, Steve Diamond, who may be online, and Matt Town are the 2 commissioners that represent Barrington to the commission.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Jen Sis from Stratford Regional Planning Commission. I'm joined with Matt Town, one of your commissioners, to SRPC, and I thought Steve was going to join us. I don't know if I see him there. Nonetheless, wanted to just take a moment to touch base with you all, trying to make it to all 18 of our communities in the region, just as an opportunity to keep you up to date on what we are working on currently, and have an opportunity for you to pose any questions to us and let us know if there's anything that we could, in particular, that we could be doing to assist you. So I believe in your meeting materials, you have a handout that we sent along. I do have some copies if there's anyone that wants one. I'll let Matt have one too. So The handout, I'm not going to go through and read every detail, but I am just going to mention a few highlights here within this packet. And I'd like to start by just reiterating that we wear 3 hats under one roof and one organization. First and foremost, we're a regional planning commission as established by state statute. And under the Regional Planning Commission, that is really where we capture the majority of our local technical assistance programs, particularly in the areas of land use and environmental planning, and just kind of anything else that is of a hot topic. We are also what is called a metropolitan planning organization. That is a federal designation for the regional entity that coordinates federal transportation funding. We act as that go-between between municipalities and the state. Then the third hat that we wear is that of an economic development district. Another federal designation, this one comes from the Economic Development Administration. So all 3 of these entities are governed by your commissioners, which is why it's very important to have active commissioners. So we're very happy to have that from the town of Barrington. As part of those 3 hats, we have several core planning documents that we prepare on a regular basis. This includes our long-range transportation plan, as well as a regional comprehensive plan. The most recently updated of these core plans is our regional housing needs assessment that was adopted by the commissioners in March of this year. And you've got a sheet with some highlights on that in your packet. We also have our comprehensive economic development strategy that we prepare an annual update to. And that update was just adopted in June. It is a 5-year economic development strategy. So we're about midway through that 5-year time span. At our September commission meeting, our commissioners helped us to sift through many of the different strategies that we have within the comprehensive economic development strategy that are things that we as the Planning Commission can be doing to help strengthen the economic well-being of our region and our municipalities. And so just some highlights of that prioritization exercise are also included in your packet. One of the things that we pride ourselves in are our online data resources. We have a core data team within the office that are very skilled in both geospatial and quantitative statistical studies. And so they work together to prepare a whole suite of online resources. And again, in your packet, you have just some highlights of what some of those materials are. A lot of work on the GIS side. And a lot of times, and I know Jackson in our office is regularly in communication with Connor and Vanessa, so that whenever the town has a mapping request, Jackson is our lead GIS planner, they'll send it over to him. And at no cost, he's able to generally turn it around pretty quickly and provide the town with some updated map materials. We also have and maintain what we call our data snapshot. It's really a series of data snapshots. So any kind of data point you would want to know about the region or your community, we have it pulled and quickly accessible. We do an annual update to this that we publish in April each year. That's timed so that when the annual census data releases come out late fall, about this time each year, we start running with that and we have it all produced and published in April. This past year, the newest kind of update to that was we added in individual municipal highlights, so you can just pull a quick Barrington selection of data points. The last thing I included in your packet is just an overview of how we use your municipal dues dollars, which I think is very important for you to hear from us how your dollars are utilized and invested. And so just the kind of the short version of how that comes out within our budget. Within this year, we're in our fiscal 24 budget right now. Dues comprise 7% of our overall revenues within our budget. 77% of your dues, however, go directly to matching our federal programs. So, the largest of which is our transportation programs. 50% of dues go directly to the federal transportation programs. That is not something we have a choice in. And so we are greatly appreciative of your support to be able to make sure we can keep those federal transportation dollars flowing. And then the second most is our economic development programs. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that we do have coming out, as that again is utilizing those dues dollars. You'll see on, at the end of that handout, there's a table and there's a pending program called Safe Streets for All. It is a grant that we as Stratford collaborated with the 3 other metropolitan planning organizations in New Hampshire to pursue that grant. And what it does is provides us federal dollars from Highway Administration to create what is called a Safe Streets for All strategic plan. That plan is a prerequisite to any of our municipalities being able to seek the implementation dollars under that federal program. So the goal was that by kind of pooling that together as a larger geography, we can kind of keep the costs down of doing that and make sure that all of our communities are eligible for those funds. So that is something that should you have a project that is safety focused, it'd be a reach out to Colin in our office, and we'll be happy to help kind of figure out how that fits in. And we'll be reaching out as that project gets underway. So that's kind of the highlights there. Just kind of give you some updates on some of our programs that are specific to Barrington and that we've been working on. On the transportation side, we worked with you all a few years back now on the sidewalk project for Route 9 and 125, and it includes some pedestrian crossings. That is in the 10-year plan, and it is moving into, or it has moved into what we call the Transportation Improvement Program. Those are the 4 years of funded programs. And it has preliminary engineering scheduled for 2026, so that is coming up pretty quick. Let's see. Another item, Colin, our senior transportation planner, wanted me to give you a reminder on is that we are still kind of waiting to hear a bit more about the DOT corridor study program. We do have 125 in the queue of corridors to be considered by DOT, and we're waiting to see where it falls in their prioritization schedule. Last thing I'll mention on the transportation side, or next to last thing I'll mention on the transportation side, is again, part of our data collection programs. We have a very robust transportation data collection program in particular. Not only do we do vehicle counts, and you set out the tubes and that to count traffic volumes, but we also have bicycle and pedestrian volume counters. And so that is something that if you have a project that you're trying to understand, particularly for trails projects and of the like, and you need some data to support a grant application, our team can go out and set those counters. They can run year round. I will also say on our vehicle counting equipment, we do have a new AI-based vehicle counter that it uses a camera. So normally, like the tube counters, we can only do like in the summer, fall, cannot run those in the winter, snow plows rip them up. The AI system can run year round. So if you do have something where you are looking to get some of the traffic volume related data, we can send that out year round now. So that's kind of a new piece in that transportation program. And then the other piece is as we do our regular transportation project solicitation, we do have a consulting engineer that is of no cost to the municipalities to do some of that preliminary project scoping, preliminary design, and cost estimating, so that you can help help municipalities get projects into that 10-year plan pipeline. and also try and better scope projects so that we know that they'll be a little bit more successful if they have a good budget going in from the start. We got a lot going on. On the environmental planning side, I know we just provided a letter of support for the Swains Lake Village Water District's application to the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund Source Water Protection Grant Program. So we're just curious to hear how that goes. I know that was just submitted recently. And so along those lines, let's see. Kyle sent me notes and I don't know what his last note is. I apologize. So along those lines, you know, depending on how that project goes forward, just keep in mind we do we have the resources to help with kind of the follow-up environmental planning programs. So just another thing that I had mentioned further in my notes. So along those lines, if there are grant programs that you are looking to pursue, and it's something where you're just looking at it going, you know, the administration or the grant application side of it, not in your wheelhouse, don't have the staff time to put into that grant administration, we're more than happy to help. So for example, we're currently working with Milton. We previously worked with Durham. They put in for a clean water or a state clean water revolving loan fund grant on the planning side, which it has a loan forgiveness component to that. And we did all of the back of this and reporting and administration for them for the cash flow side of that grant. So those are sort of things that we can do. Couple communities that we're working with, we're doing their reporting for their other grant programs. So it helps alleviate some of that administrative burden at the municipal side. And again, happy to help with some of that grant writing as well. Along those lines. Housing chapter of the master plan. I know our team has been moving right along on the housing chapter. Had the community forum not that long ago. The community survey is now closed and had a total of just shy of 500 participants, 498 participants responding to the survey, which is a phenomenal response rate. So that's a really, really good. And so I know that upcoming, I think next week, the team has a meeting with the steering committee that's going to generate some of the input to go into some of the scenario planning exercises that we are going to next do as part of that process. That is kind of the big picture. Lots of other things going on, but I think those are kind of the big highlights we've got.
Jen, behind the desk here.
Yeah.
Could you give a few examples of what some of the other towns are doing in terms of some of these development grants?
I mean, sure. So, for example, we just helped Northwood write a grant application for the Source Water Protection Grant Program at DES. They're going to be doing a septic survey if funded around Harvey Lake and Northwood Lake. In part, like that particular application is looking at the fact that there are multiple community water systems that are right on the lake. And then on top of that, those two water bodies have been seeing increased cyanobacteria blooms. And so just looking at septic systems in particular and trying to identify where they are, how old they are, and whether there could be any particular risks. And that'll help the municipality to identify what their risk factors are to impacting their water quality, particularly from the drinking water perspective. That's just one that we're just now working on. I mean, it kind of runs the gamut. We also worked with, and we're just getting set up, worked with Milton and Farmington, USDA Rural Development Grant for them to do some community facilities technical assistance. They both have some older municipal facilities that they want to get an engineer and an architect in to do some of that preliminary engineering and architectural so that they can see about rehabbing or repurposing those buildings. So that's something where we wrote the grant for them. They are funded, and then we'll do the grant administration and some of the outreach and engagement for it. But by and large, the majority of the funds are getting passed through to those third-party consultants. And so by having us do that, they were able to pair up and be more competitive for funding because it was a national funding pool. So that made them more competitive by teaming up and having us come in and help them to do that. And then we'll also, again, do all of that grant administration for them, working directly with USDA.
Great.
So
Thank you. You done?
I'm done, unless they have questions for me.
Okay, first of all, thank you for the invitation to appear before you. I am, as you know, relatively new to the commission, so I am still on the fairly steep learning curve. But I will tell you that going through their site has been immensely educational. The amount of data that can be obtained by just looking at the numbers long enough to have the meanings come out to you. For example, one of the things I noted for the income distribution within Barrington is that north and east of Route 9, the income is substantially higher than it is south and west of our town. And so from a long-term planning perspective, that might give rise to how do we make sure that we don't, to use another word, balkanize or separate a town into have and have-nots. So things like, fortifying that part of town, and I'll give a specific example. As you know, I'm on the energy committee as well, and Paul Panish and I have had discussions about how we can bring down the cost of electricity, not for the community power piece, but for winterizing some of that section of town. I've done a lot of canvassing in there, and I know that many of the houses really do need some living, and so there is money available, and so getting that money into these people's hands, and a website doesn't work. I mean, it will work for some, but most of the time they need that personal connection. They need a person knocking on a door saying, well, if you have concerns about your electric bill, here's some ways we can help. And I'll be leaning on the commission to help feed me those sources with some of those funds and working on a handout, if you will, that we can follow up with these residents so they can start to winterize their home, and they'll cut out electric use simply by not blowing out through broken windows or whatever. So that's the way these things can be connected. Now, I've received, I sort of view my role there as to bringing the immense data and resources of the commission down to Barrington in a personal way. And as an example of that, Joyce, Ms. Capello had asked me to research about some discussions about a bike path or a footpath from Barrington to Rochester, that had been talked about, and we were doing it, we weren't doing it, it was sort of vague about where it stood. So I reached out to some local resources, Doug Bogan in particular, but also with the commission, and using their data, they can say, well, this is some of the hurdles you have to overcome if you were going to do that project, including building bridges and footpaths, clearly a lot more detail there. But that's a way to take that resource and individualize it for our use and consumption here. So I would invite you, and Jen and I talked the other day, I really want to get my hands dirty on this project, meaning I want to get involved. And the way to do that is to make sure your footprints are all over my desk. So ask me questions. And it can be, if I don't understand, and early on I won't, but I'll ask questions until I know, and that just keep beating that up. So just to reiterate, and things that I would see coming on the horizon, things like if you do the TIF district, that's going to have traffic ramifications and parking areas and the like. And it's a great opportunity to get the commission involved in terms of design what that might look like. Things like, we're certainly not at the point now, but someday we will be at a point where septic systems and water systems will have to be on our horizon, and be thinking about that now. Now I'm 71, just turned that just the other day. And so I'll probably not live long enough to see that come to fruition, but the means of planning for that starts early on. And so having some assistance in land use and where that might situate, or alternatively, discussions with Rochester. So the commission can help you map out, here are your 3, 4, 5 best options for dealing with that when it happens, in 2030 or whenever it is that happens. So it's good to plan for that now going forward, and the commission is suited to do that. We talked about the grant writing, the networking. It's one of the things I found fascinating on the commission is that these are really social group of people. And so for those who actually attend in person, Somersworth in particular, are standouts and the level of detail and how they get some of the projects on the list. So that networking capability, every time I talk to somebody, that information comes back to Barrington, in one way, shape, or form. In the population counts, public health interventions, environmental justice considerations, and how we make our town supportive of all of our citizens, and acknowledging the role of food deserts and the role of medical care and the role of public transportation. That's all stuff that we can be talking about in the commission on your behalf, and not to tell you what to do, but rather give me the question, I can bring it back, and then bring back the answer or some resource applied to that. So the takeaway message from me, and I think by extension with Jen, is that use us. You're paying the nickel, so get fully a dime's worth out of that nickel. Any questions? Sure.
Federal transportation, besides the counter, how else is that money being used directly for Barrington?
Sure. The wide range. So they did some work initially with the prior planner to kind of figure out how to fund the sidewalk project for 9 and 125. And I know Colin has been talking with Vanessa about sidewalks and trails projects in general, and that's something that you do have access to. I know a while back we did, was it the plow routes?
The GIS for the plow
Yeah, we did
routes.
some GIS for plow routes. And a lot of it comes down to like picking up the phone and saying, hey, we're interested in X, Y, or Z. So that's part of it. And that's part of Matt's point of pick up the phone, ask us some questions, ask us for those technical assistance services. I mean, if you do have projects that you are looking at and considering, Colin is in the process of meeting with every municipality right now to scope different projects, not just for the most immediate 10-year plan, but he's trying to like build that transportation project queue. So he really wants to hear from you. We do have extra dollars that we've put into that contract engineer for this current 2-year process. So that is something that if you have something, let us know. I mean, each of those, the individual task orders range, in the a couple thousand up to like 8,000-10,000 that you don't have to pay for. That's coming directly out of those federal funds. So it's pretty much so if it's got, people moving in any way, shape, or form associated with it, we have the funding resources to assist with that. It doesn't have to be on state and federal roads either. We do have a section of our contract from the Department of Transportation that's local technical assistance. So it's anything with local roads and working along those lines we can do. I'm trying to remember if there was a whole flurry of road safety audits that we just recently did, and I'm trying to remember if we did one. We worked with Barrington on one. Do you recall?
There were 2 done in Barrington.
Okay.
In 2019, there was
Okay.
one at the intersection of Beauty Hill and 125.
Okay.
And then after that, we did our COVID road safety audit, which was very different, at the intersection of Scruton Pond Road and 125.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I know Colin in our office helps to put those applications together to DOT and participates in those as well. Another piece I'll say that we're building out right now on the transportation side is we have a new staff member who's taking on transportation modeling. And so part of what that will entail is 2 different scales of transportation modeling. One is like the larger network and looking at like if you break a bridge over here, what happens to the transportation infrastructure, or if you build a new road over here, what happens to that overall travel pattern. But then there's the smaller scale of looking at the software is called Synchro, and it's looking at that smaller scale and literally modeling it, and it has It's like the video games for transportation planners. So that's another piece that we have in-house.
Excellent.
Tina, you had a question?
What's your relationship with the county commissioners? How's that?
None whatsoever.
Talk to them?
We do on occasion, but we are not affiliated with the county. So while the name has Stratford within it, we are Stratford Regional Planning Commission. We are separate and independent. We are, like, I mentioned earlier, established under state statute under RSA 36 as our own political subdivision of the state. And so, for example, we are 18 communities, whereas Stratford County is 13. So that means we have 2 towns, Brookfield and Wakefield in Carroll County, as well as Northwood, Nottingham, and Newmarket in Rockingham County that fall within our region.
What kinds of things might we expect from the DOT look at Route 125? You mentioned that would happen in about 2 years.
Not the 125. So there's the corridor studies, which is a
assume that
separate.
was 125.
Yeah, so 125 is within that kind of list of corridors that DOT has. They are working with a consultant that they have hired that has created a prioritization mechanism for looking at all of the corridors that were identified statewide for studies. And then they'll be going in that order of prioritization. We just don't know the results of the prioritization. So we can't say where any individual corridor is in that queue. But, I think it's kind of hearkening back to, I think it's been at least 20 years in the state of New Hampshire that we have done really robust corridor studies. And so typically when that is done, it's not just looking at like volumes, but it's looking at land use and development patterns and going along that whole corridor to identify kind of problem areas and really planning along the full length of a corridor so that it's not just doing spot improvements.
And just on that note, we talked about the intersection of Beauty Hill and 125. That the Department of Transportation's excuse for not making any improvements at Beauty Hill and 125 is because they don't want to make an improvement in one place and it be for naught because the whole corridor needs to be studied. Now, the engineering consultant that did the road safety audit identified very clear location-specific improvements, a list for the town, a list for the state. The town has done almost all of their improvements, and we are inching closer to the state ponying up and doing some improvements at 9 and 125. And not ironically, it will likely be development in the vicinity of Winkley Pond Road, which will be enough to push that project over the edge and get the state to make some improvements in their right of way at the Beauty Hill Road intersection so we can have a safer intersection for residents there. But it's tough. The dynamic between good planning is important, but implementation is important too. And so since 2019, the state has had a clear, a prescriptive design of how to solve a lot of the problems at Beauty Hill and 125. And it's gone through a couple of individuals at DOT, and it's a lot of times it's, oh, well, we want to zoom out farther. We want to zoom out farther. And, my perspective is New Hampshire's only so big, you got to get a pretty clear picture. But we've been optimistic. We signed a letter of support for the corridor study on 125 4 years ago, probably.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
It's been a while,
So,
quite a while in the making. So
in
that's
support
why
of that.
we're getting a little bit antsy too to see what the results of that prioritization are.
Right.
And I did, I just jotted down a note so that Colin can maybe do some following up with DOT even on that particular intersection, because I think, the road safety audit program that comes under what's called the Highway Safety Improvement Program, that those projects can typically kind of bypass that whole 10-year plan process to get implemented because they are generally of critical importance because of safety concerns. So
You can share with Colin the last update from Bill Lambert is that it was approved by the Highway Safety Improvement Plan Committee.
okay.
And they're looking to get concurrence from the executive office.
Okay.
And that last update was from,
Okay.
inching closer.
Right. Anything else? I do know.
One more question. would you have data that would like support, like you brought up like sidewalks, would that support or show like what the maintenance and what it would cost the town to maintain those in the future? Do you have data like that?
I don't off the top of my head, but I know they could probably find out. Wanted them to
Oh, so you
research it
guys
for
don't, you guys
I don't know if
don't,
we have it, like,
you know, say like if you
Yeah.
have so many, 1,000 feet per sidewalk, you can figure on, I didn't know if you had data like that.
I don't know if we have it at our fingertips, but it would definitely be interesting, and I'm sure you're not the only ones that would want to know what that is. So I'm sure we could, and that would be an example of like transportation studies that we can do under those dollars that we have, and kind of, we could easily reach out to other communities that are actively maintaining their sidewalks and figure out like what their budgets are and see if we can kind of come up with an average cost per linear foot.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right, well, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Just wanted to make sure I wrote that down. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we'll proceed with budget presentations, town clerk and election information.
Welcoming to the table our elected town clerk, Kimberly Karakas.
So,
So you don't want any money this year?
Perfect.
well, when I went through with the ABC, there was very minimal questions, so I would hope reviewed whatever they had given for questions and answers.
Just turn that microphone towards you just a little bit, just so it's point, yeah. You don't have to, just so
Thank
it's
you.
pointed at you. Thanks.
Well, I could say 5 with the deliberative.
Beginning.
I was just for elections and then the deliberative session.
How are the credit card machines working out? Because
Very good. We have, let's see, to the end of October, we've done 107,000 with credit cards. So that's pretty good.
Perfect.
Any more?
Impactful.
Well,
You read
most,
the line over and go, oh, 200, okay.
yeah. Most of it is elections. That's where most of the increase is coming because of the rental of the poll pads and the amount of elections. And remember, Tracy, I need to have enough ballots ordered for the town election.
Because we know what happened.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
You were there. Cannot have that happen again.
Good exercise.
Yep. Learned a lot.
I don't have any other questions. Well,
Anyone else? Wow.
Budget committee? You'll bring the budget.
Oh, budget committee, yes.
The budget committee had no concerns. Wish her well as she goes through the year.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I think we're all.
I'm
set with you
done.
then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Our next presentation will be from the Recreation Department. Jessica, are you doing that?
Coming to the table now is the Recreation Director, Jessica Tennis.
What section is this of our binder?
in full force
19
entries.
I would say, I'm gonna have
Was
Sarah
not.
Bailey join us as well. She's gonna hand out her goodies.
And the, oh, yeah. Three, is that too many? No, it's not. I'll start with 2. I'll start with 2. In keeping with the tradition, we have homemade, what is it
I
called?
just hit share.
My mom called it chocolate yummies when I was a kid.
I have to drive.
Homemade chocolate yummies.
Thank you.
Not expected to have any impact on decisions about budgets, but
But now
I
that
know,
you've
I
done
think it's
it,
interesting. What was the origin of
but now that
this?
you've done it, let's approve it.
do you really want to know the origin?
I'll leave it quick.
It was my birthday 3 years ago when the initial budget presentation happened. So I brought cupcakes and challenged the rest of the department heads to also bring treats. And so started the tradition of treats at budget committee meetings.
And has a large impact on why your contract keeps getting
As-
renewed, Coder? No, I'm just
The
kidding.
two are
Everyone who's
not
listening.
mutually exclusive.
Well, we were panicked because at 2 o'clock this afternoon, we realized that we forgot the cookies. And so we went into overdrive and made sure that they were ready for you guys.
Well,
So,
thank you.
Oh, well, thank
Dedication
you.
was
That
there.
makes it more special.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so I put together a slideshow. I'm a visual person, so being able to kind of see the visual is just helpful for me. So if you guys have any questions throughout, please feel free to just interrupt and ask them. But I tried really hard to kind of focus on what we have done as a recreation department over the last year, kind of that comparison from year to year. When I became the director in 2020, everything fortunately kind of came crashing down with COVID. So the silver lining of that is that we were able to really kind of get into the guts of the department, figure out why we were doing things. Was there a better way to do things, and kind of reevaluating. So since then, we've really tried hard to kind of beef up the amount of programs, but also and make sure that we're keeping the quality of our programs going, while also making sure that we're kind of expanding into those priority age groups that we kind of talked about. So our seniors as well as our teens. Those are two priority age groups that we're really kind of focusing on as we're kind of going into that 2023, 2024. So keeping that in mind, I just wanted to give an introduction about like what we are and why we show up to work every day. So our mission statement is to provide a variety of programs that promote participation, encouragement, teamwork, health, and wellness in an effort to foster a strong sense of community for all Barrington residents. With our vision statement being that we envision a town where all residents are actively engaged within programs that promote a healthy lifestyle, demonstrate positive sportsmanship, and encourage community engagement. Those were kind of refined in the last year and a half, and we've really tried hard to kind of hone in on all of our goals, kind of re-tying back into those mission statements. And that's really where we tried to kind of identify what those priority age groups were and identified those seniors in those. So this chart is just a growth by year. So the tan chart is the annual participation. So you can see, or the participant number. So from 2021, we had 4,622 participants, where at the end of 2023, we are projected to have just over 8,000 participants. We've almost doubled our participant load in about 2 years. In regards to the programs being offered, you can see that we have really tried hard to, again, not necessarily making sure that we're just copying and pasting our programs, but we're really trying to add new programs. So just this past year alone, you can see that we went from 33 programs up to 40. So that was a variety of programs from our seat chair aerobics that just kicked up or started up last week. Our summer yoga that we offered, Curious Movement. We did a theater program. The team program is the Teen Exploration Adventure Mentoring Program that we got the grant for the van to utilize. The summer concert series, which was a series of 4 separate concerts throughout July and August, and our Tai Chi program. So you can see that we've really kind of hit the ground running, and we're trying to get as many programs in as possible. This year, this is our proposed budget that we are submitting to you guys for recommendation or for request. So the largest increase that you're going to see is in the part-time hourly wage. Majority of all the other positions stay the same. As you can see, they're the salaries and the benefits for the director, the assistant director, and our part-time administrative assistant, as well as the earned time buyout. This year, the increase is just about $49,000, and that includes the cost of the administrative assistant going to from 25 hours to 34 and a half hours, as well as that single plan health insurance. And then we also had an employee within the department that became eligible for their own health insurance because they fortunately but fortunately hit the age of 26 and had to jump onto their own insurance. So that is where you'll guys see the increase from last year to this year, just kind of broken out by line items. Those are the only line items that we're proposing out of the operating budget for this year. Yeah, so that's it. Any questions before I go to the next slide?
So part-time to full-time on that third position, Dan.
So it went from 25 hours to 34 hours.
34
Is still
makes the-
part-time.
Is still part-time.
35 is
not-
full-time.
35 and above.
The steps of our benefits, at 20 hours, employees are eligible for earned time, short-term disability. At 30 hours, employees are eligible for individual health insurance premium coverage by the town. And at 35 hours, employees are eligible for family plan, dental, long-term disability, life insurance.
Any other questions? So this next slide is kind of an overview of what our budget request is and kind of why we got to this point. So I have something that I'm going to kind of go over that explains it, but what is on the board and what you guys can kind of see is a brief breakdown of the job description of that position. I've asked the administrative assistant to kind of track and to kind of identify how many hours she's doing within each of those duties. As you can imagine, from season to season, it definitely fluctuates. You know, that fall season, as we have all of those new year programs starting up, before and after school care, all those type of things. There's just a lot more communication that needs to happen in regards to our constant contacts, getting everything set up in the system and making sure that things are allocated appropriately to the, like, each GL code. So there's a lot of intricate aspects of the position, but they definitely fluctuate with those seasons as the department does. So as you can see, you know, from lower end, we're at 31 hours to all the way to the higher end, which is 46 hours. So, and again, this is just the job description. I'm sure there's random things that walk through the door, but this is just kind of a breakdown of how those hours are utilized. So to give you a little bit of history on this position, previously this position was deemed necessary for the department and was budgeted at 25 hours per week through the operating budget. Over the past 10 years, we have requested for the administrative assistant position to be expanded on several occasions, most recently in 2019. As the department has continued to go, the original 25 hours was not enough time to complete the duties associated with this position. To maintain the same level of service for our community, we increased the hours for the administrative assistant last year through the revolving fund. This position is imperative as it is the first point of contact for every form of customer service through our department. With the extended hours, the office staff aren't required to facilitate customer service, which decreases distractions and makes for a more efficient work environment. The past year is proof of the additional hours making all the difference, as we have been able to implement 7 new programs and pursue multiple grant opportunities. This past summer, we were able to initiate the summer concert series. These events were free and accessible for all residents, bringing both new and familiar faces to the event. At each concert, we saw community members with ages ranging from mid-70s all the way to toddlers. Programs like this are part of why Barrington is such a desired community. In addition to spearheading customer service, the administrative assistant works directly with the financials to ensure daily deposits, account reconciling, and payment tracking are accurate for all budget groups. Every dollar that comes in and out of the office is tracked and monitored through this position before being sent to town hall. Having accurate reporting is imperative not only for recreation, but also for the finance department. Erin, our current administrative assistant, has been working diligently with the finance department to provide accurate reports as we have shifted into the new software system this past May. Without those additional hours, we would still be evaluating reporting options and holding up the monthly reconciling and quarterly bill transfers. We believe that reallocating the additional 9 hours in single plan health insurance into the operating budget would have a minimal impact on the overall tax rate, but would allow the recreation department an opportunity to grow and expand the programs and events that we currently offer and want to offer. We hope to continue to provide quality programs and events for Barrington residents while also maintaining our same level of. So that's kind of like, sorry, I have to read things because my brain gets all crazy and I get passionate. So I just wanted to make sure that I kind of explained that this isn't just kind of like a one-off request that we're giving to you guys. We've really been kind of trying to get this position to where it's needed to be. And by having that position at 34 hours, we've seen that direct impact within our department and the community. Questions? So with the recreation department is the lovely revolving fund, which is always a discussion. For those of you who aren't super familiar with the history of the recreation department, we have had a balance that has kind of gotten quite large over the past couple of years. That is due to a couple of different layers and dynamics going on. But when I became the recreation director in 2020, again, silver lining of COVID was that nobody was in the building. We knew what needed to get done for projects, and we decided to just grab the bull by the horns and just do them. Since then, we've definitely tried to start to kind of address that revolving fund, which should have been addressed prior, but we just didn't know how much money we really wanted to invest in that building. Where are we staying? Where are we going? Where's the library staying? Where's the library going? Knowing that we needed to do something, the floor was beyond dilapidated. Oh my goodness. We decided to make those updates. So I've kind of included the two charts on here. The revolving fund projections is basically a breakdown of where we are currently, but also some of the lines that the Recreation Commission, as well as the rec staff, have kind of identified as upcoming projects or anticipated quarterly bills. So you can see that right now our revolving fund balance is just over $600,000. However, you can see this chart is basically 1 year out from where we currently are today. So you can see that the grant match for the CDFA grant, which we're going to be talking to you guys about more, is earmarked in there. Prior to that being earmarked for the grant match, that was always in there for kind of like park development, park updates. We utilized that line for the leveling of the community field behind the playground. So that was kind of something that was kind of identified, but we reprioritized that line with this grant opportunity. The recreation garage went out for bid, I want to say about, or Brayden went out for pricing, I want to say about a month ago, maybe a little bit more. But with the grant opportunity, there was a possibility that could or could not be encompassed, and so we decided to kind of wait on that. But the pricing that came back for that was about $155,000. That is, our plan is to take the old summer camp shed that is very, very old, getting rid of that and replacing it with the shed that's currently up by the communication tower, and then building that garage right there, so that way it can kind of be a dual service. We can utilize it for van storage for our new 15-passenger van and for more recreational storage, those type of things. The next ones down there that you can see are basically the quarterly bills. So those are quarterly bills projected on our overhead for our department. So you can see quarter 3, quarter 4, quarter 1, and quarter 2. We have our projected revenues in there with an anticipated revolving fund balance of $281,903.20 1 year from today. So I think the reason why I brought that up is because not only are we earmarking these projects, but we're actually doing them. We're putting our nose to the grindstone. We're making sure that they're getting done. We're trying really, really hard to be as resourceful as possible. I've talked about the grant opportunities that we've received. We've really tried hard to kind of maximize the opportunities that we have. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone could kind of see that we have the money in there, but how we kind of plan on utilizing it. Below that is a chart of all the completed projects that were completed through the revolving fund that we didn't have any sort of tax impact on. We didn't ask for any additional support or tax dollars to kind of offset it. And I just thought that that was, I was actually blown away by the total at the bottom of that. I knew that we have done, you know, projects here and there, but when you actually really start to compile them and you look at how much has happened in a short period of time, it's exciting. So you can see that we updated the gymnasium walls, replaced the bleachers, resurfaced the floors. We installed the shade structures on the playground. We replaced the old scoreboard. We leveled that community field. We reinstalled the fence, and we paid the additional funds for the 15-passenger van. So that is, you know, $266,675.60. So, and then just down below, just so that way people kind of have an idea of what direction we're going in based off of the needs assessment strategic plan, some of the growing issues that are kind of happening here in town. We've identified kind of a bandstand, some sort of pavilion, an actual large community pavilion, like something similar to Little River Park in Lee. I'm not sure if any of you guys are familiar with that, but doing something like that. We're going to be looking at doing some sort of pump track, outdoor courts, whether it be pickleball, basketball, or a variation of both, walking trails, and some formalized disc golf course within all of the woods that we have. So those are some of the projects that we've kind of identified. We're just waiting for our next opportunity. So. Any questions on this page at all? No? All right. So all in all, when this department was originally established, I don't think that anybody really envisioned, sorry, I'm gonna read this again, and I feel terribly rude. I just wanna make sure that I don't forget anything. So when the department was originally established, I don't think that anybody envisioned how large of a role that it would play within our community. Barrington is a unique town, and we strive to meet the needs of our growing community. We understand the importance of not only physical health, but the mental and emotional health as well. Offering a variety of programs for all age groups brings tremendous value to the community. It encourages our residents to participate while feeling comfortable, making new friends, and getting them involved with town groups and organizations. This is what fosters the sense of belonging and the small town feeling that we all have grown to love and appreciate. The Recreation Department has not only been focusing on the quality of programs, but also on the quantity of programs to ensure that we have a wide range of offerings for all age groups and interests. Since moving the administrative assistant to 34 hours, we have added 7 new programs, with many of them operating multiple times per week. Due to this, it is imperative that the administrative assistant remain at 34 hours a week in order to complete all necessary duties and maintain the consistent level of service. After moving forward, without this position being fully funded out of the operating budget, and Recreation Department anticipates barely breaking even at the end of the year. Currently, our revolving fund houses approximately $75,000 worth of overhead without any revenue to offset. This includes everything from our printers to our contracts to our computers, literally everything. Out of the additional, if the additional funds are not relieved from the revolving fund, we may have to do some sort of either cutting back on our programs or making sure that we're really being extra resourceful on whatever our resources are. With that revolving fund, we've always just been able to, we're going to invest a little bit of money and hope that they come and make sure that it works. And most of the time it works out. Most of the time we end up having people come through the door, but we're not going to be able to be as risky with taking on some of those opportunities and some of those programs. And so I think for us, it's just really important to make sure that we're moving forward in that direction. So as our department basically continues to evolve, and we anticipate becoming more of kind of like a parks and recreation department. Originally, you guys saw that we had the capital reserve request for the park maintenance. We've decided to rescind that this year and do some reevaluating of some opportunities that have come up. But my concern is really making sure that we have the recreation side really kind of honed in, making sure that we have a well-oiled machine before we're going and kind of adding that parks piece to it. We're really excited about that opportunity, but it is a lot of discussions that has to kind of happen before then, and we just really want to make sure that we're not jumping off of a unsteady ship already, if that kind of makes sense. So with the above mentioned, I know that you guys have a lot of requests that are coming through, and sometimes it's easy to just kind of, those low-lying fruits, just being able to kind of, pluck them away here and there. And I think for us, it's just really important that we're reiterating the fact that this is the first time as a recreation director in 3 years I've come and asked for anything additional within our budget. We have the data, we have the staff, we have the commissioners, we have the user group that are interested in it. We really just want to make sure that we are continuing to move our department forward and not kind of, sitting stagnant. So I hope that you guys are able to kind of take that into consideration. I know that you guys are in a hard part when you're looking at all the numbers, but we wouldn't come and ask for it if we really didn't need it. So I appreciate you guys considering the request, and we're open to any program or department ideas, suggestions anybody has. So I know I kind of went off my spiel, but but I just wanted, that's kind of where we were at. So
Excellent presentation.
Yeah, well, and thank you for the contributions.
where were you?
Summer was fun.
Yes.
I was just gonna comment.
Thank you.
Well, the ABC has no.
Scott, sorry, if you could maybe stand at that microphone, be the easiest, just to make sure we pick you up on the recording. No, you leave it on.
So, did a great job as well. Really a lot of the conference. We had no real comments. There was a lot of discussion. Just a lot of
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the increase in usership. That's quite a big jump. Do you have any future projections of what you think maybe prompted that, or how it might continue? And how often do you increase your fees?
Yeah, so we, before we run a new program, we always go back to the prior year budget and try to make sure, really for us, what we're trying to do is make sure if there's any additional, like, for basketball, let's say, if there was a hoop that needed to be replaced, we're really making sure that we're prioritizing that over a couple of years. So typically, we're only doing smaller increments of about $5 to $10. For some program, that's a huge jump, so we really try hard to kind of keep that, consistent. But we do look at that for every program annually. And then what was the other part of your question? Oh, the participant number.
Yeah, just what your projections are.
Yeah, so I would say, honestly, a huge part of that was the summer concert series. I think there was one event alone, and I believe Tracy was the one who did the head count. We had like over 400 people at that one summer concert series.
Was that with fireworks?
That was with the fireworks, yeah. Yes, but I would say that we averaged over 100 people at each of those events. So just having, 4 of those events right there alone really kind of increases that participation. We've added a lot of the like midday adult programs that we never had before. So like the adult drop-in pickleball program, that was something that we've really had. Tai Chi. So the gym really just kind of like, we just waited for everybody to get out of school and work. And we're like, what are we doing? People are home. People want to get out. So that it's a lot of that midday program and the community events that we've seen that have kind of like beefed up those numbers. So, yeah.
And, are we going to address the warrant article?
Which one?
On the recreations,
15,000.
yeah, the 15,000.
They
capital
withdrew
reserve.
that. So Jesse had mentioned it,
Thank
but
you.
in my TA report, and the conversation about the grant opportunity, which we'll talk about under item G,
Right.
Very exciting.
is kind of the higher priority. And so the director and the commission have withdrawn the request for a capital reserve and plan to revisit it in the future.
Would point out part of the discussion we had at the ABC at least was that increasingly many of these programs, for instance, specifically the summer concert series, are not revenue generating as many of their other programs are. So that changes, I think, and in the future may change. And I think Jesse was talking about making this also to do with recreation and parks, so that their mission is expanding significantly. And I think the advantage of our community may have to do some shifting in the way we pay for these things. Not all the things that they want to do and are doing are going to be revenue generating, as many of the programs have.
I think one of the very important programs, especially for working parents within our town, has been before and after school programming. And certainly in many ways adds value to the community, but also enriches the lives of the children, where we may have grown up in a generation of the latchkey kids. The kids are able to interface and certainly have supervision in times where parents are still at work. So I think the expansion of that program a couple of years back was real.
And to just kind of jump on that really quick, we have hired March, I believe, we hired our basically a school age coordinator. So that school age coordinator is really kind of going in and providing that quality programming within that before and after school program. We've started an active Odyssey, so we have our program coordinator going into those programs and offering kind of like unique enrichment activities for those kids to be able to participate in. So we're really trying hard, again, to not just be like your programs and you're going to do youth sports, but really trying to kind of bring those into each other elements. So that's something that we've really been trying to kind of like beef up in regards to camps and all that stuff. So, and for after school care. So thank you, Tracy. I have cookies tonight.
So
And thank your mother for the recipe. Great. Excellent.
we will see you back up here
Yes.
to talk about the
Yes.
capital improvements.
Yep. Perfect. And you have a slide ready for that, right? I don't need to keep my
Yes.
computer. Okay.
Correct. Yep,
Awesome.
we're in and ready to go. I'm
Okay.
surprised that you made it through that whole presentation without mentioning blue zones. And to
I
Daniel's point,
know. wanted
of
to.
the value of recreation and programs in a community, take some time and look up blue zones, and we'll all collectively decide if we want to set for a goal as establishing Barrington as a blue zone for longevity and prosperity in life.
Yeah, so it's a
Great.
Netflix series,
Netflix
only
Yeah.
4 episodes, half hour each.
Yep, how to live to 100. So at first I was like, oh, this is
And
kind of cool.
happily.
And then recreation came in, and I was literally sucked in. I tried
Yeah.
to get my dad to watch it, and he's like, Jess, like I can't get it involved. And I'm like, but you have to. It's so cool. So Connor's right. The blue zone is totally where we're headed. So
Great job.
thank you all.
Thank you. All right, so next we'll hear from the library. Susan Scottiello.
And Elizabeth Bolton, likely our library director.
All right. Good evening.
It is a good evening.
We're going to start with Liz is going to review our budget and has a handout, some of which you've seen, some of which you haven't seen.
I'll get another one. This book.
Thank you.
Hey, Liz.
I have mine, so yeah, you just give it to Tiffany's good.
Good evening. Actually, this is good practice going through the ABC first because I sort of cut some of the excess fat out that I had. So then we'll try to streamline it for you all. Basically, looking at the budget from my end, I know that it's tough economic times, at least it is in my house and everybody. So I didn't want to add anything extra or large or ask for anything outrageous. I wanted to see where I could reduce costs if possible. And luckily, when I were able to reduce a huge amount in the library building improvements and maintenance line with the help of Jim Anderson, who's been wonderful. Because we needed our shed moved. We wanted to have the DPW be able to plow for us again because it was difficult finding a contractor to slow and be reliable at the same time. So I asked Jim, and he and Mark discussed it, and thankfully the highway department has been wonderful. They came, they excavated, they moved the shed. We're thrilled. It's in a much better, it wasn't really in a good place for us either. So it's in a much better place for them. They can now plow again, so I do not need any extra money in the library building improvement. That's reduced that budget line by about $2,200, almost $2,300, which brought that line down 47%. It sounds large, but it's not a huge line, but it made a big difference. So I've just got this sheet here showing the areas in which we've seen change, positive or negative. That was a negative change. We reduced that line. The other lines that I have that I've had to actually add monies to. The first one is book collection maintenance. Had to add money to that one because we cover the books with a plastic substance, all of them, and with oil and everything going up. Things of covering our books has become much more expensive. We brought that up by an extra few dollars. Our advertising and public relations, because we're in a year when we like actually to move into a new, get the vote out. We're trying to do more for the people. We sent out a post. We actually reached all the people who aren't on social media. But we've had to add money to that because the price of color printing has gone up, as well as the price of postage. Thank you. The dues and fees, we added a slight amount. We added an extra $60 to, which looks like 6% increased change. Hampshire Library Association fees have gone up. Movie licensing costs, which we purchase in order to be able to show films, summer, and adults for book stuff, that's gone up. And even Zoom has gone up in cost. It's taken a massive jump from $10 a month to $7. So there's been a slight increase there. Postage, yeah, I think we had 3 price increases this past year, went up 13%. I was reading a paper online, they were already planning for another January. Another one, I think, the postage is gonna be, rates are going up, so we've asked for more. We've asked for an extra $100 postage. Another area we had to add to is digital materials. Not a huge amount, but because we participate in the New Hampshire Downloadable Books Consortium, during the COVID pandemic, when we told everybody to stay home and stay on their screen and download your books and read them in the safety at home, people took our advice and they've run with it. And the publishers have discovered that this is unlike a physical book, which if we buy a copy for the library, we get to keep it. We can check it out as many times as we want. We can hold on to it forever. When it's been loved enough, we can weed it out of the collection if we want. Digital materials, the whole pricing structure is totally different, and it's all determined by the publishers. We do not purchase ebooks or audiobooks per se. The publishers have it on a 2-year lending strategy where we can buy 2 years, 26 checkouts, or 2 years worth book for about, for Stephen King's Fairy Tale, I think it was $95 one copy, and that's only good for 2 years. Once we reach our 2-year or 26 checkout, it drops from the consortium's playlist. And if we want it again, we have to pay $95 all over again. Publishers are loving this. They think this is wonderful. Now, we do not pay $95, but because we're in the consortium and we split out all the costs keep going up and up. So for this year, we're going to be paying an extra $700 in downloadable costs, and the cost is based on our, so is encouraged everybody to go ahead and use these and enjoy this. We are now reaping what we've sown, higher costs. We also offer them Hoopla, which is another service. This is simply through the library itself. We don't share this cost with other libraries. A lot of people have discovered that Hoopla, you actually don't have to wait on the waiting list. So we've got more people doing that as well. So we've asked for a slight cost, that one. So overall, our operational budget minus our staffing costs has gone down. Like it went down 5% that's for the operational budget. However, when I look at, overall percent change, we've gone up by 2.95%. I've been told, I was told previous town administrator, or if I kept it between, and everybody. So we tried. Do you have any questions for?
So by dropping Hoopla, so is that just less books available? You said you're saving $50.
Yeah, we're not going to have, Hoopla is actually more expensive per checkout. Now, if they go through Libby or New Hampshire Downloadable, it's about 25 to 95 cents per checkout. Hoopla, we've had to drop it because it's an instant gratification for people. You don't have to wait, but some titles you have to pay as much as we pay $4.99.
Hoopla has movies and music as well as books. The loan period for books is 3 weeks as opposed to 2 weeks on the state library downloadable. And what we have done years with that is we set a budget for the year. I think our budget for the past couple years, we've budgeted $500 per year, and each library card holder gets to check out 3 items per month, not unlimited. So because we wanted to be really conservative with the budget, when we didn't have any control over the state library allocation for a library of our size. So we decided to try to absorb most of that state library increase by reducing our hoopla budget by $50 a month. So we'll see, we're gonna monitor that
Yes.
closely. If we really had a lot of demand and decided we need to restore that, we'll restore it either with unspent funds if they're already in another line or through donated funds next year, and then we'd come back.
Do we have the data, because we talked about what it costs for the stuff, do you have the data for owning a book and having a staff member do it, just, you know, as far as you comparison and kind of see what you save? You know, if it makes.
Meaning,
Say if it takes 2 books and it costs the town $20 for somebody to check that out. So, you know, that's what I was kind of getting at. Doesn't sound like we have it.
yeah, I'm
but
gonna
thank
say, yeah,
you.
we don't really figure, we don't drive deep into that because once we purchase a physical copy, it's ours. We get to keep it.
Yeah, some people like to see the numbers. so
Yeah.
that's all.
Sorry.
I think one thing that's important about the downloadable books also is, I don't know what the total number of books they have out of the state library, but it's many thousands. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of books that people might read through downloadable books that we do not own. During COVID, we were not accepting book donations. Are we back to accepting book
Yes.
donations? Excellent to hear. Thank you.
But if
Had a
people
whole
bring a
year
box of
reading
books.
only Black authors, and I tried to donate all the books, and we weren't taking them, so. And when people do bring a book, usually a box of books to the
Yeah.
library, the staff reviews it before we accept them, because we don't really have any storage space. So I think they look at them, and you can speak to this better than I, is it something we want to add to our collection? Do we have a book sale coming up that we can?
Or did they give us a better copy of something that we currently on the shelf and we can swap it out?
I think it would be great too if somehow we intertwine some of our free libraries that are staggered around town and those books that maybe are not appropriate for our regular public library shelves may be appropriate for those as well.
So downloadable books is different than Libby, New Hampshire downloadable.
That Libby is the app that you download, New Hampshire
But it's the same
Downloadable is the
database.
consortium, yeah, it's essentially the same.
And there's like
database.
200 libraries, public libraries in the state that participate in that downloadable book consortium. One additional item I'll mention that's a warrant article. I know we're going to really focus on talking about the new library article. We did ask for another, what we've been doing annually is $3,000 addition to the capital reserve for technology for the library. That's used to cover purchases that of equipment that may break down, like we have a machine that is used to clean DVDs and CDs. And it has maintenance expense, but we don't know when it's going to break down or when it's going to need to be replaced. So it's that kind of thing. The other thing that we use that technology account for, it was actually created when we needed to replace our circulation system, which was no longer going to be supported. We've been with the same circulation system since then with what we had done.
Yes.
That was like in 2009, somewhere around in there. You know, it would be nice to think that those things will last forever, but they're
Circulation system.
they're
for the public.
expensive, and we don't have no plans to replace it now. The last time,
What is it?
oh, it was,
Now,
what's-
What is the circulation
Uh,
system for the public?
Atrium.
So they can
it's
understand.
called Atrium.
And what does it?
Oh, what
do?
does it do? It's
Thank
how
you.
you check books out, how
There you
people
go.
can,
Okay.
you know, look online to see if
You're
something's in.
speaking
and if
library
it's-
speak. and I
Sorry.
think People online need to know
I
what you're
figured if,
talking
you know, if
about.
it's not a bunch of letters, an acronym.
Nope, gotcha.
And that system cost about $15,000, you know, almost 15 years ago. So saving towards an eventual expense there is another purpose of that fund. So that's, any other questions on the budget?
Looks like not. So you want to
Okay.
move into, oh, well, yes. What's with this? I can't remember to get you up here.
So we really didn't have any
concerns about the budget proposal. I will, just as an aside, a commentary, I did go onto the website again, and I'm amazed at how much it's changed over the last year. It's really become so usable, and you can go on, and I was looking for a database, and there it was. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you. The person who manages all our tech is, her name is Alex Kirk, and she has really helped transform, I think, the offerings and the outreach that are
She's
bringing people
very
into the
good.
library. She also happens to be a certified yoga instructor, so we've had a whole new class of people who are coming to the library on Fridays for chair yoga. So let's talk about the transformation of the medical office building on 125 as our hoped-for solution for a new library. As you know, the town is negotiating for the purchase of that. I don't know, Connor, if you have any late-breaking news on the status of the purchase of the building?
Nothing's final, but we're to this stage where we're just kind of dotting i's and crossing t's on a purchase and sale document. So that, I hope, will come before the select board publicly at the meeting next week on the 13th.
That would be very exciting. What we did in putting together, and I'm referring to this form.
And I can pull that up for you if you'd like.
Yeah. SMP is the architecture firm that we've been using. And so they put together this cost estimate for us. We put the 1.1 million asking price for the property as in our cost here, and we'll see how that ultimately turns out. The soft costs are primarily, architecture and related fees and owner contingency. Our architect says that owner contingency in a renovation is usually less than in a new build, so that's a more modest amount than you would have seen in a totally new construction. The building construction cost, 1.7 million, was generated by Bowen Corporation, which is our construction management firm. And they brought in a number of subcontractors that they work with to tour the building. And our architect had given them detailed specs as to what was to be done so that they could give us a reasonable cost estimate on that. You see some materials testing and so on. We being myself and the building committee, asked that Bowen separately cost out what it would cost to fully replace the roof if it needed to be replaced. We won't know about that or about the HVAC system until after the purchase and sale is signed, and then we can get a professional building inspection in there on all the systems. I could tell you, and if you've driven around there, the roof looks okay to me, but I'm not a construction specialist. It has, the building is about 23 years old, so most of the roof is 23 years old. Depends on the life of the shingles that were used and so on as to when it would need to be replaced. The HVAC system is a similar age. And so that, if we had to totally replace the HVAC system now during building construction, it would cost a little over $300,000. In actual fact, what I'm told is totally replacing the entire system, including all the ductwork and so on, would cost about $500,000. Some of that will be done during building construction because we're moving from a building with like 25 little rooms into an open space, so there will be some adjustment there. But the main mechanicals of the HVAC system, if we had to replace those all at once, it would cost about $300,000. At this point, I guess I've listened to these construction people. I was very nervous, as Connor can tell you. I felt, what happens if we get this building and we move in and 6 months later the whole system crashes? What are we going to do? We wouldn't have money set aside. I'm told that if the system starts to go, it's not going to all crash at once. It's going to go in, I guess, over time. Their machinery is large.
The 3 pieces, right?
There were 3, Dan, and what was it called? Not components, but Okay,
Yeah,
well,
there we go.
it was,
The guts of the
condensers are
system.
outside.
The guts of the system.
The guts of the system are in three sort of sections, so that it's likely that some pieces might go over time, but be something that we could replace. So, so that brings that total for construction, including all those replacements. And personally, my thinking is if the roof looks like it has 5 or 10 years left, I think we ought to replace it when we need to replace it and not do it all at once. And then the final section, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Those are sort of plug numbers that the architect put in based on his experience with other library projects. And that brought it to a total of 3.7 million. If you take out the 300,000 and the 83,000, we're down to less than 3.5 million. If we were building an entirely new building, a 10,000 square foot building that we were looking at before, and we did not have all that building construction cost numbers, but using the average cost per square foot for new construction, which our architect said is around 450, between 4 and 450. That was looking at a number like approaching $6 million. This number of more like 3.5 million is, we think, a much better deal for the town and would give us a library that I think would be very functional for some time to come. It is smaller, but we really think with the efficient layout that you've seen, it would really work for the town and is a cost that we think is reasonable. The 3.4, 3.5, whatever it turns out to be, we'll know more about that number actually once we have an inspection done, because this is based on, not digging into testing HVAC systems and so on, but a visual view of those things. But if it stays at that level, as you know, the foundation has been raising money. They have over $300,000 in cash on hand at this point. They're launching new fundraising and grant writing. And you recall that the foundation applied for a grant that the select board supported for us. We will know whether we are selected for funding in mid-December. And I think Roger may be here in the audience, so he can clarify that if I'm wrong. We asked, or the foundation asked, for $800,000. At that time, this was before this new project became available. We were estimating a new build would cost more, $800,000. It has that, whatever the dollar amount is, it's over $500,000, I believe. It has to be matched 4-to-1 ratio. So 800,000. Well, we figured, oh yeah, we're going to need a $3.2 million bond. Clearly, we won't need a $3.2 million bond. So even if the foundation is selected for funding, we'd have to inform them that we don't need $800,000, or we can't match $800,000. So that's the good news. It's a cheaper program, but we would get less money from that particular grant. The other thing we looked at, and really again with the assistance of town staff, looking at the paving. It has a paved parking lot. There is some cracks in that. It's also been around a while. The road agent estimated that it would need certainly crack filling and sealing and painting. That kind of expense is included in the 1.7 million. But if we want, Mark thought it would that would get it to last 5 years or so. If we replaced it totally now, the road agent estimated that could cost $100,000. So those are some outstanding questions that, again, once we have an inspection and really know what are the best decisions on those kind of changes. So I'm going to assume if this property goes under a P&S agreement and we do the inspection, we can then at that time determine, do we need the $385,000 for roof and air conditioning? And if that's the case, can counter offer the P&S with the needed repairs. And if we already know that the parking lot only has a 5-year life, we can also, at that point of inspection, get a written report and potentially negotiate on the purchase and sales agreement based on those items.
Right, it's a pretty typical due diligence period where that is absolutely a possibility.
So that has the potential to reduce the purchase price by up to $485,000 for the needed repairs that we've listed here. That's one thing that, first of all, I'm very in support of this project. I know you know that. The other thing is with owner contingency. And I mean no offense to the architectural firm, but if they've done their job appropriately, that contingency amount should be 5% or less, right, of the entire project.
I don't know. I haven't done that.
Okay.
number.
So what I'm hoping and hearing all of this is that we have people in this town that are very in support of the growth that the town's experiencing and in support of this conversion project, and that this number comes in significantly lower than 3.7 based on the money that has been fundraised, the grant,
Right.
and the purchase price.
Right.
So this is, I'm assuming what we're looking at is the very maximum of
Yes.
every single thing does not go our way, correct?
We asked for a conservative estimate and not
Okay.
an inflated one, but we didn't want to come in with best case scenario
Okay.
and then be coming back to you and saying, well,
Okay.
not as good as
But
we
there
thought.
are 5 areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 areas of opportunity here that would potentially reduce this amount. Not go up, but go down. Okay. I just want to identify that so that when people that are residents of the town are looking at this, they understand that this is worst case scenario and we have
Yes.
quite certain things that are going to go our way in this process.
Yes, we have, it's certainly going to be December before we'd have final numbers.
Okay.
I'm missing it here, but the cost for ceiling and cracks, if you don't do pavement for 5 years.
Mark said he based it on what has this year just been done at the public safety building, and I think he said that ran around 8,500.
Right. And that-
And I don't know how that compares in scope, but it seems, I think he said around 12,500, didn't he?
About the same square
Right,
footage.
and the important part is that in the cost estimate in the 1.7 included much more than that, 18,000.
It included 30,000 for pavement and like tree work or anything like that, landscaping. We're not planning to do anything in this project on landscaping unless somebody gives us, $50,000 just to spend on landscaping. I think there's a couple trees that need trimming, but otherwise that 30,000, most of that would be available for pavement work.
Landscaping alone on a building that runs between $35,000 and $44,000 has been my experience.
Mature landscaping in
Mhm.
place.
Yes, I know, mature landscaping in place. And one of the lovely things about this is as we share this information with the public, and the foundation has done some very nice materials to be handing out, people can actually see what the building actually looks like because it's actually already
Yeah,
there.
it's exciting.
And I think that really is helping people visualize more. We've been getting, at least I've been getting very positive feedback. Was selling raffle tickets at the holiday fair on Saturday for the Friends of the Library, and a lot of people stopped by and we're pretty excited about it.
Connor, does it make any sense for the unforeseen estimates to put that into some sort of capital reserve? Or does the interest you pay on the bond really not make that a wise long-term thing?
Excellent question, and I have to give Ms. Gaudiello a lot of credit because we have spent a lot of time talking about this at her introduction. So in my opinion, your point about paying interest, borrowing money to put away in a capital reserve doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Alternatively, given the projected lifespan before, whether it's pavement or hopefully HVAC or also hopefully the roof replacement, time to establish a capital reserve and contribute to it annually like we do with other items. And it's I will say that for the library trustees part, my experience has been this year they're committed to being as open and transparent as possible about all possible costs. And almost to a fault, because at one point, Ms. Gaudiello was saying, I really want to include the money to replace the pavement or replace the roof in the bond article. So, we have everything's thought of. It just might not be the smart financial decision to do that. So I think as we get more information from the inspections, a discussion between the library trustees and the select board and the budget committee could be that it makes more sense to establish a funding plan for a capital reserve where over 5 years, we contribute a certain amount that residents know at the time of deciding on this project. And that might be the more savvy financial approach to funding these items, especially when we don't know for certain when something will fail or when exactly we intend to replace X, Y, or Z. So it's a good question. I know it's kind of a non-answer, but after we have a more thorough inspection, I think we'll have a more appropriate timeline and cost, and we can make financial planning decisions at that point. Please add to that.
No, as Connor said, I've come around to getting over my anxiety about everything failing the minute we walk in the door. And I do think establishing a capital reserve, and again, this is more like, a truck at the public safety is going to, need to be replaced at X year. This is a little more predictable, not quite as predictable as a truck, I suppose, because if we have a leak or a real problem and we don't have the money on hand, we're going to have to deal with it, I guess, creatively. But the ABC was very helpful in sharing a list of questions in advance of our meeting with them last week. And it was questions about what is it going to cost to maintain the building, both things like we're talking about, but what about snow removal? What about lawn maintenance? Are you going to want more staffing? Are you going to want more books on the shelves? Things like that. And so that is another document that you have. I won't review it, but we're happy to answer questions on anything that you read there or any other additional questions you might have.
So ideally, we'll see you back in December.
Well, you probably see me next week. But yes, I would say if indeed we get this purchase and sale nailed down in the next week or so, this is on the town side of it, because I would presume that that Connor would be arranging that building inspection, and then we'll see what we hear from them. There's a lot of interest in solar, electric, trying to take advantage of solar. There is one south-facing roof that I should mention. We asked Jack Bingham to take a look at it. As you know, he's on the Energy Committee, but he also years ago made the offer to donate labor to install solar on whatever we finally had for a building. And so he has just looked at it and noticed that. He said the more extensive option would be ground mount solar. And I'm not sure if we're going to go there or not. Our building committee is going to have to look at that and see what makes sense. So we are looking at that as well. Excellent.
Questions,
Yes.
anyone? Okay.
I'll look forward to
And-
seeing you in December, probably whenever you deal with.
Is there anything else you want to add to
I don't
this?
think, I think there's a lot of moving parts that are still undefined for this position on this year.
Dennis?
And Tracy, that may address, the architect did mention when he talked about the owner contingency, that there were still a lot of things not there yet, so it was higher than, he specifically identified that number. Because there are so many moving parts that are not up yet. And he talked to us, talked to the building committee.
Thank you.
Rob, did you have something?
I couldn't recall, the vet clinic right next door. When we did a site visit, I don't remember what they had for, exposure to sun or for ground mounts and things, but there's always a possibility about some sort of joint venture, right? If you multiple ground mounts that both facilities could utilize.
That's a great idea.
If they had more property place to put it,
Yeah,
It could be an advantage there.
that's an exciting idea. So the property out, I'm gonna say the back of the building, on the north side of the building, which is where the leach field is and, you know, that septic and that sort of stuff. That's, to me, it looks like that's really the only outside space we will have for outside activities or for children's play area and things like that. So that's my only caution about ground mount, but we're early yet in exploring that, so.
Well, it looks pretty shady there. It's fairly shady.
Yes, so it would mean taking down trees. I love trees. So we will certainly, there are some limbs that need to be removed that are hanging over the front of the roof, and that's not good for the roof. And we might need some limbing for visibility from at the entrance area.
Onward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so moving ahead to G, Community Center Investment Program Grant.
So Jessica Tennis, Recreation Director, is going to join us at the table again, and her and I are going to kind of present this together. So these items were presented in order on purpose because, as Mr. Shepherd mentioned just moments ago, there's a lot of moving parts, and our goal is to demystify that as much as possible and continue to do so ahead of the March 2024 warrant. And so I'll start, and then Jesse and I will describe how all of this plays together. The first thing I'm going to do is share with you a proposed design of the vacated library space. The reason I'm starting here is because if and when the library project is approved by voters, they will make square footage available in the building at 105 Ramsdale Lane. And the discussions this select board have had and the library trustees have had and the Recreation Commission have had have circled around making that space available for community space. So the library that they were going to build on Ramsdale Lane and this library at 426 Calif Highway will not include extensive community center space. The building at 105 Ramsdale Lane is very much the closest thing we have to a community center, but it lacks a lot of the pieces of a community center, most notably program space. We have the gym, we have the children's room at the library. That's it. And the gym isn't even well situated to be the best program space because to reach the offices at the recreation department with the reception desk and the administrative assistant we talked about earlier, you have to walk through that gym in that program space. And so
A very packed shared office.
a very packed shared office indeed. So
We all like each other, so.
this conversation that we're having right now started with the idea when we're thinking about vacating this library space and what to do with it. The plan from the get-go was make it into programming space, turn the building into a true blue community center. And so what you have in your packet, you all have printed copies of this. I'm sharing it online and it's available, linked to the town administrator report. This shows that library space, and what I will say is the gold standard option of reconfiguring that space for community center purposes. It adds 2 community rooms separated by an accordion wall where the book stacks are now. It moves all of the recreation department offices. So this would essentially be the main entrance to the recreation department. You have windows installed into the gym. You have a stairwell that goes down to the gym. The space downstairs is the gym and the supporting, the kitchenette is still there, but it's not offices. And so this work was done in conjunction with the design for the library, where SMP drew up these plans and had Bowen put a cost on this. So this is the upstairs. I've described it to you, so you don't need to look at the details per se. And this would be the downstairs. And so that was the start of the conversation. And you'll remember when we talked about it at our strategic planning session, we talked about whether or not to include funding in the library bond article in order to reconfigure this space, and making sure that we could tell voters that the library isn't just leaving us with a future cost of what to do with this space. We have funding in the bond article. So that became more complicated when this gold standard option was priced at $1.2 million. And the rec director, myself, anybody that looked at that said it would be crazy to add $1.2 million to the library bond article in order to reconfigure this space. That would be too large a portion of the project in order to get this, and that's just simply a non-starter. Now, fortunately, concurrently, I'm just going to stop sharing this and put something else up in a second. But at the same time, we started down the path of the Community Center Investment Program, which is a grant program that was run in April. They had funds left over, and so they're running a second round with applications due at the end of this month. We've talked about that before. We received a micro grant of $2,500 for technical assistance for grant writing. The recreation director and company have been consumed with preparing materials for this grant application. So this is a community center investment program. This grant program was written to do exactly what we want to do at 105 Ramsdale Lane, turn it into an actual community center. And so we feel very positive that we have a strong application, and so we're investing appropriate time and energy in pursuit of that grant program. And so now you're starting to see the layers that are building of what if the library passes? What if we get that grant? What if the library passes and we don't get the grant? What if the library doesn't pass and we get the grant? And so we met with the budget committee on Tuesday and very quickly realized that in the little bubble that we were living in, bouncing all these ideas around, when you try to describe that to somebody for the first time, it becomes very complex very quick. And so to aid in that discussion and to add the rest of the layers so the onion will be fully built and we can just talk about it, this is something that Jesse put together and was edited all the way up until today to try to start putting a visual on what we're talking about. And so let me get this on the screen. You all have printed copies here. This isn't linked to the town administrator report yet, but will be linked to the minutes and will be online for anybody that's looking for it. So I'm just trying to get all 5 options on the screen there. So what these options show are possible outcomes, and most of these possible outcomes depend on funding. So the last piece of the onion that I'm going to add on is I told you that the gold standard $1.2 million option for renovation was a non-starter for in the bond article. What we realized when we were building out these options is there could be a reality where the library passes, but the grant fails, any additional funding fails, and there's no other funding available. Which, if there isn't money in the library bond article, would mean that there's no money to do anything with that space. And we're back in that situation where we have to look at voters and say, we'll come see you next year for some more money. And so there's 2 decisions that we're looking for the select board to think about making, don't need to make tonight. First is if and how much money to include with the library bond article to minimally reconfigure the space that the library would vacate so that if everything failed and we just had the money from that bond article, we could do something with that space and make it available to residents and make it useful. The second piece is because there's so many moving parts and we want to minimize the amount of money that's in the bond article for the library, we're considering and we're asking the select board to consider adding to the grant bond article, which I'll further describe that onion layer in a second, but further add to that grant bond article $500,000 to increase the capacity of work at the community center at 105 Ramsdale Lane. So this last piece of the onion about the grant warrant article is this grant program is funded as a forgivable loan. And because it's structured as a forgivable loan, the voters will need to consider a bond article to authorize borrowing $1 million so we can have it forgiven. And there's $150,000 match, which the Recreation Commission has already promised cash on hand from the revolver. So in minimizing the library bond article contribution for reconfiguring the space to say 300,000, that number isn't set in stone, but bringing that down there and having the grant amount at 1.15 million. The proposal is to add to that warrant article, say $500,000, so that voters can separately decide the investment they would want to make in that building, and it's not tied to that library bond article where it's $800,000 and now 15 or 20% of the total library project cost. And it's a confusing way, and we're going to go through these options quickly here in a second, but those are the competing, to continue the analogy, I guess, the competing layers of the onion that we're trying to balance in the most cooperative way, and also most respectful way to the players involved, whether it be the library, the recreation department, or most importantly, the voters in making a decision about this. So the two decisions the select board will need to make: how much, if and how much, to include in the library bond article, and whether or not, and if you do, how much to include in the grant bond article as additional funding available for making improvements to 105 Ramsdale Lane. Tracking so far? Any questions?
No, this was an excellent thing. It really helped me understand.
Fantastic. So we're going to look just what real, did you have something, Rob?
What's the time frame on the grant application again?
March, early March, late February it was, early March will be the decision. So we'll have to have the article on the warrant before we know if we get the grant.
And that grant fund has to be, the last check has to be cut by August of 2025. So there's a very quick turnaround time to be able to implement that money. So I think that was another layer of that, like,
Great point.
hurry up and go to, is making sure that the library was actually out of there in enough time for us to be able to kind of expend those funds that we
have
needed to.
options to use the money in time.
Yes.
So we have really the potential as a growing town here to beef the infrastructure. And if I'm doing the numbers correctly, potentially obtain grants for about 25% of all of the work that we're doing.
Right.
That's kind of unheard of as a municipality. How exciting.
It's very exciting. It's a lot of work, and obviously nothing is, and it's a lot of teamwork. Nothing is set in stone, but working towards those options. And as you know, because you've written a lot of grants, you have to prepare for receiving the grant and hope to prepare the grant, but you also have to have a plan in place if you don't receive that funding and what you would or wouldn't do. And so I'm going to start with the second page, which shows A, B, and C. These are different scopes per se. Scope A is renovation of the existing library space. Scope B is changes to the existing recreation office space, so not the gym, but the office space. And then scope C would be primarily an addition out the front of the gym wall, which you'll remember you saw plans for a couple of years ago. The recreation department had plans drawn up, and potentially reconfiguration of food pantry space. So going back to the options, and these aren't listed in priority order of option one is the best possible option. It just results in the most money, and so it's listed in that way. But option one would mean the library passes, which for conversation's sake makes $300,000 available. It also includes the grant being approved, which is $1 million from the grant and $150,000 from the revolving fund. It includes, for conversation's sake, $500,000 approved by voters in that grant article for a total of almost $2 million. And with that money, what we would do is do the gold standard reconfiguration of the recreation space that's in A, build the stairs and access down to the gym, which is in B, and build that addition of a programming space out the gym wall, fixing that energy efficiency component and really addressing the bulk of the recommendations from the energy audit, which we recently had done, to have access not directly into the gym, but into a vestibule and then beyond. It doesn't include anything in the food pantry. Option two, if the library doesn't pass, and everybody cross your fingers, but in planning appropriately, if the library doesn't pass, but the grant is received of $1 million with $150 from the revolving fund, an additional appropriation of $500,000 in that article, with $1.6 million, what we would do is diagram C. So the space at the library isn't available to do anything with because the library is still occupying it. And we take those program rooms, we add the program rooms out the gym wall, and we reconfigure the offices where the food pantry is. And we would use the extra funds available to keep the food pantry on site, but in their own building attached to the garage. So newly constructed space with the garage. And that's how we would accomplish the scope of the grant of adding program space and making a community center in that way. Option 3, the library passes, but we don't receive the grant. And here's where having the additional appropriation in that grant article could be advantageous to accomplishing a larger scope. So we don't receive the grant, but voters do authorize the additional $500,000 in that warrant article. So we end up with $800,000, and we're looking at doing A and B, but a smaller scope because of the funding. So now the library is vacated that space. We have $800,000 to reconfigure the space. We're not doing the gold standard, but maybe it's the silver standard. We change that scope a little bit, still have access downstairs. Now we're doing less to accomplish all of the energy efficiency components of the gym wall and the food pantry, but we have other options we're looking at for that. So option 4 would be the library doesn't pass and the grant isn't received, but we have that additional $500,000 that we put in the grant warrant article. And in this case, we would just do diagram C without anything to do with the food pantry. So this $500,000 would just be an addition out the gym wall, address the energy efficiency of that gym wall, add one program room and move a couple of offices with reception. So now people are walking into reception, not directly into the gym. They don't have to walk across the gym floor, but there would still be offices out back. And that project was priced out during COVID at the peak of construction costs during COVID at $300,000.
$325. Yep.
$325. So $500,000 is a reasonable scope to accomplish something like that. Option 5 is that the library passes with $300,000 available. The grant isn't received and voters don't authorize the additional $500,000. And so at this point, we're kind of at the bottom of the barrel, and the first objective would be making the vacated library space functional. You know, maybe not even the bronze standard. It's what's worse than bronze, you know?
You don't place.
The pine board standard of, yeah, okay. So the brass standard. So, but make the space functional because that's the purpose of the 300,000, and hopefully reconfigure access from the upstairs to the downstairs. And so those are the possible outcomes from a funding perspective and the proposed scopes to be accomplished with that. Now, I'll say that there's still a lot of information that we're working on, filling in the blanks. We have architect pricing out the different scopes of the addition and potential work in the food pantry area, and much more information to come. But what did I miss?
Nothing. I think that's a really good overview of everything. But yeah, it just allows us, why we're very gung-ho about it is because it allows us to kind of have those separate programming spaces. So we could have yoga happening simultaneously with basketball practices or vice versa, and kind of honing in on that multi-generational senior programming, like kind of like those senior luncheons, really kind of turning the current office space into more of that kitchenette and offering a variety of opportunities that we don't have because we don't have that like prep space. So a lot of different opportunities because we have a list of 42 different programs that we want to, you know, start up with the space. We just need the space. So.
Please.
Do we have plans with this to put together like any video material that we can get out there to the public? Because the last thing we want is residents walking into voting, not having necessarily, I mean, let's face reality, reading warrant articles is boring. But so if we can put together some videos and really explain these two amazing infrastructure projects and what all the moving parts are, at least they'll know what they're looking at.
It's an excellent point, and Ms. Capiello and I spent quite a while today talking about that, and she made the same exact point that the most essential part of this could be the best idea, we could receive this grant and we could get a good discount on
Sure.
the building. And if residents don't understand what they're voting on, then we could lose those opportunities. And so, like I said at the beginning, this approach respects the residents' duty to make these decisions, right? We're not making decisions for them. They're making these decisions. And so what that does is absolutely make it incumbent on us to do our best effort on packaging up the materials in the most digestible way so that residents can make informed decisions. Videos are a fantastic idea, but throughout the whole process, it will take this village and more to be that idea factory of how do we describe it. This flow chart, and credit to Jesse, this was an idea at last Tuesday's budget committee meeting. Okay, we need some way to demonstrate this. And this is a pretty darn good way to demystify the different possibilities. But it takes those ideas. So videos, I've already written it down, but
Excellent.
yeah, that will be a
Good.
big piece of it.
Voters' budget, it's the voters' decisions.
I know we bounced around ARPA funds, the remaining ARPA funds, you know, whether it be for solar panels or, you know, insulating a gym wall or what, you know, different projects. Is what, 400,000 or so remaining? Like, if we, any earmarks for that? Or
No, so that in an effort to not make the onion too big, I guess, I don't know. I didn't dig into some of the other options that we have and we're looking at. ARPA funds, like we already talked about, are kind of that rainy day possibility for filling in the gaps. And in my mind, I kind of look at that maybe not as adding that as a chevron to this budget, but saying, okay, option 3 is what we end up with because the library passes, but we don't get the grant. And we actually need $875,000 to accomplish the most reasonable scope. We can fill in the gaps with ARPA funds. We would have the opportunity to do that. The second piece relative to the energy audit is we're exploring some pretty robust funding opportunities to pay for all or a portion of those improvements that could be done at the same time as the construction project and take money off the table that we might otherwise have to do as we reconfigure space. And so very much in play also. But great point about the ARPA funds.
if the grants are received, then that just drops the bond amount that we're going to borrow. Is that how it would work? Or would that offer?
It's a good question.
Expand the scope? Or
So I haven't taken a stab at writing the warrant article, which would obviously be reviewed by legal. But how we would structure the appropriation is, say it's the grant with the $500,000. It would be to authorize a bond to raise and appropriate $1,650,000. And then it would list the funding sources. And it would describe the $1 million as a non-refundable grant. And the idea would be to write the language in such a way that if you don't get that grant, you don't have the authorization to spend the money in the same way. It's not the easiest thing to write, so you're legally bound, because it starts to get confusing. And then it would say $150,000 to come from the Recreation Revolving Fund, and then it would say $500,000 to come from, through the bonding authorization. So the idea would be to write the article in such a way that if the article passed and the grant isn't received, that we don't have the authority to raise 1.1 million additionally, because that wouldn't be the intent of voters. And hopefully it can be accomplished in one article. Like we did with the town hall project, it might be that it's two separate articles to make sure that it's clear to voters that this is only happening if we receive the grant, and this is something separate than that.
We looking for a
To-
motion yet?
Actually,
or-
to answer your,
just
No.
discussion.
Well, there is a motion, and I didn't make that clear because things kind of snowballed, but
to answer your question at the outset, I personally think there's value to having them together on the warrant. I think that when you look at the previous bond that we did for a school of $20 million or so, this is not a huge number. It's a lot of money, and I get that, but it's we're finding all sorts of savings in these projects, and this is an ideal opportunity for the town to take advantage of this other building and the land acquisition, everything. And it seems as though when someone's looking at a price tag, the relative small amount that you would add on to that is not going to make a big difference. You're talking that kind of number.
Right. No, it's a good point, and I appreciate hearing you say that because, you know, I was trying in conversations with the rec director and the library trustee chair, trying to think what is the number, what is the tipping point when it does move the needle too much, right? In my mind, I was like, is it 10%? Is it 5%? 1.2 million seems like that's definitely too much of a portion of the overall project. Like that's too much to add that makes it not just a library bond article, but more than that. So yeah, I guess to your point about making a motion, the TA report was written in such a way to authorize, for the select board to authorize writing a letter of support for the grant. And so that would be the motion. It snowballed because there was more to talk about. Like I said, the decisions that we'll have to make and have further discussion about are how much to, if and how much to include with the library bond article, since there has to be a separate article for the grant, if and how much to include in that article as well. The proposal that kind of makes the math work right now at this juncture is 300,000 in the library bond article and 500,000 with the grant article. And if you have feedback now, by all means provide it. But if you don't, be thinking about it. We'll talk to the budget committee about it. Once we get this graphic in front of them, we'll make a decision as we progress.
Scott, do you have anything to add at this point?
Right. It was made with the budget committee in mind, so.
I left that meeting and I was like, if my mind is spinning, I bet you their mind is probably off of their head at this point, or off of their shoulders at this point. So I apologize, and I hope that this brought some clarity to it, so.
At the expense of putting it in color too.
Revolving fund.
Person, for the sake of time, could I make a motion?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to sign a letter of support for the Community Center Investment Program grant enthusiastically.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Bye-bye.
Gibson, aye.
And sure.
Capello, aye. All right, thank you.
Thank you guys
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Connor.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to consent agenda minus item 6, G.
I move that we approve the consent agenda A through F and add H
Sounds good.
to the consent agenda.
I will accept as modified.
All right, roll call.
Bye-bye.
Gibson, aye.
And Trick, aye.
Koshad.
Capello, aye. Okay, we're moving on to appointments. I don't think we have any for this evening. Staff reports.
Okay, very quickly in the interest of time, but we're at the first meeting in November, so I do want to read through our November work anniversaries, starting with the longest tenured John Janelle in the fire department for 25 years.
Quarter of a century.
Right.
That's amazing.
And still very involved in officer capacity, and will certainly be playing a part in the future of the department as we start to look at the future of fire rescue in Barrington. Aaron Paradise is currently the transfer station administrator and highway support assistant. Has worked for the town of Barrington for 15 years this month.
Excellent.
Richard Smith in the fire department for 11 years, Abigail Clark in the recreation department for 7 years, Terrence Glazier in the transfer station attendant for 4 years, Peter Curtin, full-time firefighter for 3 years, and Cameron Berry was hired in the police department 2 years ago this month. Appreciate the tenure of those employees. Really quickly, the Green Hill Bridge, we're closing in on opening, so I just wanted to provide a brief update. Everything has pretty much gone to plan. When you're building a $3 million bridge, there have been issues, there have been delays. Since writing this, they hit really hard ledge in the exact spot. They had to put a piece of drainage infrastructure, which resulted in a $10,000 change order to rent the equipment to make the ledge go away. And so that's the minor change to this item. I just talked to the engineer this afternoon, and they'll be paving on Thursday, the base coat, and then they'll be paving the top coat likely the next week. And so hopefully maybe the end of the week of November 13th, the bridge will be open.
We can do a ribbon cutting?
So we did on Malago. There was a gentleman who rode, I think, his three-wheeler on Malago all the time. And so we ceremoniously let him be the first
I
person
remember.
across the
Yeah.
Malago Road
Yeah.
Bridge. There doesn't seem to be, I'll have to check with the fire chief. As a lifelong resident of Green Hill Road, maybe he has ideas, but
Like
stay
maybe he
tuned.
cuts the ribbon
Yeah.
and we get the crowd. Yeah. We have some very excited residents and some not so excited residents who have enjoyed the quiet. So.
Right.
Or we could have ribbon across and then race and see who breaks the.
I'll write my
breaks the
name
thing.
across.
There is growing concern that Green Hill Road will turn into a racetrack, but I can assure you that the police department is aware and prepared with targeted patrols to keep people at the speed limit.
Great, we can move off my road to that road.
And hats off, there have been 2 Green Hill residents that have been taking photos that reside very close to that bridge and have kept a lot of people in town in the know as the construction has taken place.
A community project indeed. Community Power Joint Meeting and Public Hearing. On this past Thursday, the Energy Committee held the first of 2 public hearings on the Community Power Aggregation Plan. That was recorded and will soon be on the town's YouTube channel for folks who want to watch that presentation. And then on November 17th, the Energy Committee will be having a joint meeting with the Select Board. The first part of the Select Board meeting will be a joint meeting for the second public hearing. The representative from the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire will be here to help present and answer questions. And that will be the second public hearing on November 27th. Linked in my report and on the town's website is the aggregation plan, the handout, which the chair of the Energy Committee and others have been handing out at the transfer station, and the web page on the town's website, barrington.nh.gov/energy/community power. Moving on, elected and appointed terms expiring in 2024. So there's a list prepared by the town clerk that is aimed at making folks aware of the terms expiring in 2024. If you're elected and need to sign up, that's generally in January for a 10-day period. And if you're appointed, you can reapply for the select board consideration, usually early in the year.
There is one error on the second page. Jackie Flanagan just took her oath this week and has just joined the ZBA. So 2024 is not. Is it her?
It's
renewal
right, and
year?
here's why. It's an
that?
important question. So especially with land use
Go on.
boards,
Okay.
the position, whether somebody's in it or not, is sets the time frame. So you had a vacancy, a full vacancy,
So she
with a
only
term
has
expiring in
1-year appointment.
2024, right? And so, yeah, that's written into
Can you see me
statute.
holding my breath right now? Because I
That
really
she
am
likes
glad
it.
that we finally have a
Right.
full ZBA.
Um,
Okay, so, okay,
It's a complicated.
understood.
Yeah,
No, I understand.
I wish it were
just
different,
was
but it
shocked
isn't.
when I saw the name and I
I know.
thought, that's dumb.
I know.
Okay.
Okay, the Landry Nippo Lake Conservation Property closing, I wanted to let you all know that it's scheduled for November 17th, closing in. This is conserving 164 acres of property along Nippo Lake. The Conservation Commission and the town are involved. I don't know if I put it, yeah, an executory interest holder. That decision from last October of 2022, where the Conservation Commission will contribute $100,000 towards the project. So closing the loop on that one. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Municipal Officer Administrator Cottle.
The only thing that I have is a wet signature request for a voluntary address change. It is an urgent change, so I'm going to ask you to sign it tonight.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So moving on to old business. We have the Dudzik Swains Lake Village Water District Conservation Project, and that will be up for a vote tonight.
Right, and there's a few representatives here. Let's see if I can catch them all. Dwayne Hyde from Southeast Land Trust is in the back. The chair of the Conservation Commission, Doug Bogan, is here. The chair of the Swains Lake Village Water District, David Toddy, is here, and another commissioner, Richard Myers, here as well. I think that's everybody. There might be others online. So do one of you want to? You're all here. So somebody come on up and explain what's happening. Everybody's sick of hearing from me.
I'll let you start.
And it isn't new information to them. They do
Okay.
know, but there's exciting updates. So they'll be glad to hear.
You want to kick us off and I'll start?
And just hit the one button on there. You can't mess it up until it turns green. There you go.
All right, so we're trying to conserve, it's about 74 acres of land that was owned by the Dudzik family. Mr. Dudzik passed away, and the family's hoping to put the land in conservation. So they originally came to Connor, who sent them to conservation, who sent them to us. This land directly abuts our wellhead property. It's within our wellhead protection zone, and it's a really interesting little piece of property in that it's off of Hall Road. So if you drive down Hall Road, there's 3 distinct watersheds. Swains Lake drains, it's the Bellamy River, and Mendham's Pond runs out through the Little River, which becomes a tributary to the Lamprey River. And cradled right in between the two, there's this property, which is the headwater of the Oyster River. And that's the piece that we're trying to protect, and we're asked the conservation has generously offered to help us do that, and that's what we're here to talk to you about tonight. You said you kind of had some ideas about what it was already, so I will let you take it from there.
Before you do that, Dave,
Yeah.
and nice to meet you. I'll see you
Nice to
tomorrow
meet you. I'll see you
morning.
tomorrow morning, yes.
Would you give your name and address?
So, yes, David Toddy, Shady Lane.
Thank you.
And I'm Dwayne Hyde. I'm the Land Conservation Director for the Southeast Land Trust, and we're assisting the Swains Lake Village Water District on this project. Southeast Land Trust will have no legal interest in this property, but because it is a drinking water project, which protecting public drinking water supplies is part of our mission, we wanted to help the district in acquiring this important property, which abuts their 70 acres, which has 2 wells that serve the district. The district serves about 350 or so people, and in addition to the 200 site campground, Barrington Shores Campground. So Mr. Dudzik, Ken Dudzik, who owned this property, passed away earlier this year, and the property is in the family's estate, and the family's all from away, and was interested in selling the property. And thank goodness for Connor and others in town pointed the Dudziks in our direction and the district's direction to work with them on conserving the property. So jumping ahead to where we are today, we had to move pretty quickly with the family to get an appraisal done. We did have that appraisal completed, which found the fair market value of the property to be $335,000. The family did agree to a generous bargain sale. They agreed to donate $50,250 in value and sell the property for $284,750. So they did have a couple of requirements in that donation, that the land be referred to as the Ken Dudzik property in their brother's memory, and then also that the land remain open for hunting and recreation. So which were all acceptable to the Swains Lake Village Water District also. So we had to move quick. There's a funding program operating under the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund. So we assisted the district in making an application to that grant program, for which the request is $189,760. There's a second grant built into that for transaction costs, which included another $22,125. So with that funding, if we are successful, there would be $121,815 left to raise. This year, this funding program is very competitive. In past years, it was undersubscribed, meaning they had fewer applications than they had fewer applications and more money available. This year is quite the opposite. They have $2 million available and about $3.5 million in requests. So the program is using some of the commissioners that administer the program are looking at weather projects are ready, meaning have they got secured all their outside funding and are ready to go, which got us a bit nervous. And we came to the Conservation Commission and told them of our plight about conserving this important property that's supplying drinking water for your residents. And the commission agreed to a funding of $65,000 for the project using the Conservation Fund monies. So that's monies that are in hand with the Conservation Commission. Of course, Doug can highlight that. In addition, Swains Lake Village Water District has $40,000 in this year's budget that they are working to put toward this project also. So at the end of the day, if we are successful, we have about a little less than $17,000 left remaining for the project. And we have the good news, other late breaking news, I haven't even told Doug this, but we have the property under agreement. The district does have the property under agreement with the Dudziks. The purchase sale agreement was signed on Friday. So it is secured at this point. We have until the end of next year to close. So that's kind of, yeah, hopefully that is not too much information,
No,
but just
that's
enough
great.
information.
So I'll just add a couple of notes. One, and you touched on this, so I reached out to Len Turcott, and I understand he was in touch with Mr. Toddy as well. He has coordinated with a colleague of his who is a commissioner and put in a favorable word for the project. And the one note that he had back was that match funding in place was a big piece of it for them, which you're already aware of, which is great. And so the second piece is the MOU between the Conservation Commission and the town has the select board ratify contributions from the Conservation Fund. So it's the Conservation Fund's money to spend, but that's the agreement with the town. And this is a question because this was all pretty dynamic, and I have a newborn at home, so I didn't have time to ask. I understand that the property won't be under conservation easement because the Swains Lake Village Water District is a public entity and it can be structured that way. With the $65,000, is the Conservation Commission acquiring any interest in the property if the district dissolves, or how is that structured?
So with respect to the protection of the property as part of the funding from the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund, the state holds deed restrictions in the property to ensure that the land stays in conservation use, public water supply use. It does not give the state the ability to purchase or own the property, but it does restrict the property. And given that the Swains Lake Village Water District is a municipal entity, government body, we didn't include any legal interest for the Conservation Commission because they are a municipal entity
Right.
of themselves. Yeah.
So to that point, the motion that's here, in order to make the online materials and the posted materials as all encompassing as possible, I assumed that there was a property interest. So you can take out that last part where it says per RSA 36A:4-A, that wouldn't be applicable. What the select board will be voting on is simply to ratify the contribution from the Conservation Fund towards the project. Are you comfortable with that, Doug? Okay. Okay.
Right, so we're moving to ratify the contribution from the Conservation Commission of $60,000.
65.
65, sorry, to the Lake Village Water District Conservation Project.
So moved.
Okay. Roll call.
A second? Who's the second?
Second.
Okay.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Trick eye.
Scotia.
Capiello, aye.
And I will also mention, they talked about it earlier, but Chair Capiello will be at the hearing tomorrow morning at 8:30, I think, in 12 short hours to support the project.
Thank you very much. This is going to be very helpful for them to report tomorrow that the funding has been secured.
Great.
Sound supportive.
Do you have a card by chance?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay, cool.
I'll leave one up.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an exciting opportunity for the town.
The most conserved land mass area of any municipality and.
You forget there's a lot of undeveloped land up north.
Okay, no, I meant for.
Have you
for
heard of the
Stratford County.
National Forest?
I meant Stratford County.
Okay, that's a good
I
question.
meant in Stratford County.
We can ask our partners at the Stratford Regional Planning Commission.
They will know.
They will know.
Excellent.
2023 exemptions.
Exemptions and credit analysis discussion.
Okay, so we tenderized this topic a couple of meetings ago, so this isn't a new information. What is new information is the report that you have in front of you, which is the exemption and credit analysis for 2023. That does two things. It updates, this is now an update from 2018. We've done an 18 through 2023. I included links in the document so you can see all the historical data. And this shows the financial impact of the exemptions and credits that are utilized by residents of Barrington. It also shows our exemptions and credits in comparison to the county average and the state average for each level of exemption and credit. It's important to note that the exemptions, for example, include the averages include communities that offer no exemption. And so that weights the averages down a little bit, obviously. So that is what we've done dating back all the way to 2018. The new piece of information, which was requested when we talked about this once before, is the utilization of each exemption and credit by housing type. And so you'll see underneath each exemption or credit a list of how many housing units utilize that exemption and a list of the categories of different housing types and how many of those housing types use the exemption or credit. Hopefully I described that part well. Tracy asked in a much simpler way, but that's the information that's included. What the select board needs to decide, and it doesn't have to be at this meeting, but it should be soon, is if the select board is going to propose any changes to the exemptions or credits to voters in 2024 to be voted on. This document is, in my opinion, the most valuable tool for advising your decision. The second piece of information, which is a valuable tool in advising that decision, is the revaluation. So exemptions exempt a portion of taxable property, and on average, taxable property appreciated 30% for residents, really over the past 2 years, but as an increase this year. And so with that information, what questions do you have? What is your inclination as far as proposing changes?
Madam Chairperson.
Yes.
So I took these, I had 5 years that I had reviewed online and through in a spreadsheet, and we've had a 27% increase. And we did a very good job probably 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, of analyzing the credits and found that single elderly was far below what any of the other credits were and made a change to that. But I do feel, while these are important, that we're starting to really encroach on taxpayers. And so I think it's wonderful that we are such a giving community when it comes to exemptions and that people are utilizing them appropriately. But I do think we need to consider leaving them status quo so that we stop. 27% over 5 years. And if we add in the large change from last year, I think we're going to see about 32% over 5 years in an increase in these dollar amounts.
Shannon?
And kind of in contrast to that, some of these are really essential to people's lives. The increase in valuation of almost 30%, that would suggest, at least for these that are really necessary for life, and I would specifically point to some of the elderly and disabled people that argue alternatively that we might consider actually increasing some of those. But I haven't thought that out in detail, but it's just a consideration.
Mhm.
So the veteran tax credit were maxed out
Right.
with the state, so it would be the elderly would be, I could live with a cost of living raise, which would 3.2%.
That's about $45 a year that you'd be saving.
I haven't analyzed the detail. I'm just,
We,
in principle saying,
Yeah.
suggesting that.
and we could change it next year if needed, right? Because we're coming up into a change, with our, country government as well, in the next year and a half here, so. I don't know, we did, what was that? Oh, go ahead. But, leaving it as it is, I kind of agree with Tracy. It's like, we added for the veterans, we did what we could. But, you start messing with it yearly and, it just, I think it has a chance to get out of hand. Oh, well, we're gonna do this different this year because, usually, people are force of habit or creatures of habit, right? And you get used to paying something or setting so much money aside and so on and so forth. And everybody out there should be projecting. So if you're in one of these situations where, you may be coming to us to say, hey, I'm in a hardship and I don't, have money for taxes and this and that. I mean, now's the time to start really getting that into play, not when, April rolls around or the turn of the year.
Well, tax bills will be coming.
Yeah. So I'm in favor for keeping it as B for this year.
I agree with those. The assessments went up, but the tax rates will balance that, so they're not going to necessarily see an increase in their taxes. Although, I mean, the overall budget may go up, so there may be increased tax overall. Are there programs, like, I know Publix, Eversource used to have this thing, neighbor helping neighbor, kind of where someone could donate extra. Are there programs like that that municipalities could do where it's hard now because so many taxes are collected just in escrow and automatically, but are there ways where a pool could be established or something for people with hardship?
I'm not aware of a mechanism. One thing that the state did with some of their ARPA money identifying the housing concerns in the state was establish looking to you if you remember the name of it. It was a housing program, and there were a lot of eligible expenses. Some of the eligible expenses were past due taxes and property taxes. And this was the first time in recent years that there was a program that included those costs as eligible. Now, there are eligibility criteria, so anybody couldn't apply. You had to show a need. So programs like that have popped up. There was a similar type program during COVID, but not as systematic. But I'm not aware of a mechanism locally where we could invite residents to contribute more to offset certain resident taxes. I do want to make a note about something you said about the tax rate offsetting the value increase, which is 100% accurate. The difference for some of our taxpayers relying on exemptions are right now, one of the elderly exemption levels is $161,000, $161,500. There are plenty of properties valued at less than $161,000. And those property owners that have that exemption have paid nothing in taxes because their exemption value exceeds the value of their property. The value of their property rose 30%, 30% of 160, that's 3248. So now their property's worth $205,000. And now they have a tax bill on that $39,000. And the tax rate is lower than it was last year, but they don't know that because they didn't pay taxes last year. And Chair Capiello and I talked about it at length earlier today. And, that is in a spin zone that is a positive thing because the value of their property, especially somebody that is in advanced age on a fixed income, value of their property appreciated 30%. And anybody that monitors the real estate market in Barrington knows that it's probably more than that because properties are selling. By point of reference, the conservation subdivision down off Meadowbrook in the south part of Barrington, about as far south of Barrington as you can get, those vacant lots are on the market right now for $200,000 for an unimproved vacant lot. But anyways, so yeah, the value of the property is rising, but there will be a category of people of taxpayers who previously paid nothing in taxes and would have a tax liability because values have increased.
As I pointed out to you several times before, though, most of these elderly people are on fixed incomes. They're not planning to move, so it doesn't really matter what their property is evaluated as far as their income is concerned. It certainly applies to how much they take out for taxes. So in fact, that the fact that the value of their land is, they're now land poor, basically. Like,
We have seen a 9.1% increase in Social Security benefits. So if we did, I'm just stating that, I guess the one thing I would be amenable to is potentially increasing the income limits by that 9.1%. So there's no one that loses what they currently have for an exemption. Does that make sense, Dana?
Like I say, I haven't really thought the whole thing out. I'm
I
thinking
just
more conceptually, and I'd have to think about those numbers.
32% of, it's just been a large increase over the past 5 years. And I'm not saying that they weren't warranted increases, but I will share with you that in 2018, when we began exploring the veteran service-related total disability, at that time, the discussion at the select board was a plan to bring the entire benefit, the 750 in combined with that total benefit, to the 4,000, not 4,000 plus 750. And then members of the select board that had discussed that changed, and that amount changed. And that is definitely a category where we have seen a number of people, we've seen a large increase. 26% in 5 years, and then another almost 7. So you've seen, I keep having people say, well, I don't move to town for that tax benefit. And that may be true. But if I were looking for a home as someone who, potentially had a limited group of resources, I'd be thinking Barrington is a giving community as it stands right now.
So just the price of any house here might preclude that.
It's okay.
Yeah, the
People don't have to move here too,
I just,
No, but I just mean for that argument, I think.
I just think we need to be mindful. We're approaching projects and we're growing as a community, and we want our infrastructure to meet the growth of the community. And I'm certainly all for evaluating this. But I think we really need to be mindful that number is a large increase over the course of 5 years.
So tonight's discussion, it sounds like we're not prepared to take a vote here. It sounds like you may want to think about some figures.
I didn't think we were going to take a vote anyway.
No. Is there anything that you need from me? Is there any analysis or data that would help you make a more informed decision at an upcoming meeting?
I think we need to know, especially in reference to our elderly residents and our disabled residents, that based on the changes we've had in valuation, how many of them potentially will be impacted by that. So if it's 110 people and all 110 are now all of a sudden finding themselves.
So you want to see how many are in that category of last year paid no taxes, this year will pay taxes?
Yeah.
Okay, that'll be easy.
Don't you think that that's appropriate?
That's part of it, but some of it's going to be an increase. And I would further indicate, I don't think many over 80s are moving to Barrington in a big rush here in the really expensive project. Most of the people coming here are relatively younger. We have a younger population than the rest of the county, the rest of the state. I don't think those are people that are gonna, talking about the people who are here, are gonna stay here and gonna live here for the rest of their lives, which may not be all that long.
Would it be complicated to have a variable where you're looking at years as a resident
Yes.
as a factor? Would it be really
Yeah.
complicated?
So the only.
That was clear.
It'd be one way to.
Yeah, so there's I'll have to brush up on the statute, but there is a provision in the exemptions that require a certain number of time being a resident of New Hampshire and a resident of the community you're applying in. So, yeah, some of it's different is what is what you're remembering. So, we check that. In the applications, we check to verify that they've been a resident for a certain period of time, but we don't have data of how long all of the exemption credit holders have lived in Barrington. And even if we did, we wouldn't be able to apply the exemptions or credits based on that because it's the criteria for eligibility is set by the state. We can move the value of that criteria. Select Person Hardikoff mentioned the income limits, increasing the income limits. So maybe somebody with the 9% increase in Social Security is no longer eligible for the credit because their income is too high. We could increase the income limit to reduce that. We could increase the asset limit through inflation and other costs. And we could also increase the exemption level. Or decrease, change.
One of the things, and you know from working in healthcare, but one of the things that was being touted 2 years ago from Stratford County was, we've had a 15% reduction in people on Medicaid. And I'm like, yeah, that's not because they don't need Medicaid, it's because they fell off the means-based cliff. And so it's not that I haven't studied all this. I think if you're going to do anything, take that 9.1% and apply it to allowing people to continue to be eligible, so that if you are experiencing a larger income, you wouldn't lose the ability to have an exemption.
Okay, I will get the list, de-identified list of taxpayers who paid no taxes previously and with the new assessed values would pay taxes that benefit from an exemption. And if there are other things you'd like in the meantime, please let me know.
So we'll put this on the agenda for next time, or you'll decide that at some future date?
Either the next meeting or the one after. The next meeting is a week from tonight, and so I can't guarantee that we'll have the data.
Can we get the explanation too of the disability exemption?
Explanation. The eligibility?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that anyone needs? Okay. All right, we'll move along then. Old business item C, 2004 trick or treat date decided by Barrington Kids vote.
This is the most exciting item on the agenda.
This is the most important thing you may vote on tonight.
This is the biggest decision probably of your select board careers.
Do you guys read? Do you read the social media? This was huge.
I know.
This was huge.
I immediately.
We were like, we were being vilified over rain, and I just thought, oh my goodness, this is quite interesting.
Jim, give me the benefit really quick.
I would like to make a motion to allow Barrington kids to decide the date and time of trick or treating in 2024 through the democratic process at the 2024 Barrington Kids vote on March 12th, 2024.
Second.
And that's for 1 year.
Oh,
Right.
I don't know.
No,
We
because I
wanna
think you
start
do
with
it
just
a
a
couple
year.
years in a row, you know where the mood of the
deed
town
goes
is.
unpunished. Once you're gonna do this, you might as well let them run with it. It's their holiday.
Well, I don't know. I disagree. I think you do it a couple times so you know the mood of the town,
Okay.
and then you call it.
We're giving them a
Oh,
choice.
roll call.
And we're giving, the options are yet to be determined, but to include the day before Halloween, the last Saturday in October, which would be crazy.
Yeah, don't even put that there.
I don't know, maybe there are other options, but you're truly going to give
I
them
love
the
kids. I'm
ability
not giving up Saturday night.
to make the decision.
Roll call vote. Article 5.
Call the question.
Oh, no.
Van Trek, aye.
Capiello, aye.
Fantastic.
All right, that has passed. New business. Dannon, tell us about the delegate to the
Well,
New Hampshire Municipal Association.
I don't know if you're going, but the way it was written was that had my name down, it was from last year's.
Right.
So I would suggest putting your name in there, assuming you're gonna be there the day they vote.
I think that's Wednesday, isn't it?
Yeah, that was my bad. But that's Wednesday at 3:30.
It's new dad brain.
I knew you weren't gonna go.
Yeah, Wednesday is the.
So I move that Scapiello be authorized to vote for Barrington at the NHMA.
Second.
Roll call.
Hardikoff, aye.
Aye.
It's not.
Okay. All right, Capiello, aye. Thank you. Select Board reports and concerns. I know it's just
Tax
been a
rate.
week. Tax rate. Okay, new business.
You're trying to skip you don't want to
hard
be
one.
this is everybody's Christmas card from the town.
Before we vote on this, you may think this is a Christmas card, not after I saw my valuation number. Can you tell taxpayers how they file for an abatement should they need to?
Yes, there's a form. It's available on the town's website. You can abate for two primary reasons. One, if you disagree with your assessed value and can demonstrate that through whether it's comparable sales or other data that your assessed value is too high. You probably wouldn't file for an abatement if you thought it was too low. The second reason you can file for an abatement, primary reason you can file for an abatement, is if you feel like you're disproportionately taxed. So maybe you feel like your value is appropriate, but your neighbor has the same exact house and his or her value is $100,000 less. You can demonstrate that you're sharing a higher tax burden because your tax value is higher than your neighbor's and you have the same house, even if your property is worth what your house is and not what your neighbor's house is. And the deadline for that is in March. Pay your tax bill. You have to pay your tax bill and you can file for an abatement. So 2023 tax rate, the reason that it's different this year, the select board doesn't usually vote to set and finalize the tax rate because there aren't usually decisions to make. The thing we're doing different this year is instead of funding the warrant articles from unassigned fund balance, the select board put all of the warrant articles on the tax rate and made a commitment to utilize unassigned fund balance for the first time in a decade to buy down the tax rate and offset some of those appropriations to capital reserve funds. The reason that was done was in part because there wasn't enough unassigned fund balance to fund all of the warrant articles, and in an effort to be more open and transparent for residents, they were all put on the tax rate. The voters decided what they wanted to prioritize, and the select board is paying a proportional share of them through unassigned fund balance. At the time, the select board anticipated that $688,575,000 or $575 would be available to buy down the taxes, which indeed it is. And the proposal is actually to use $747,000 even from unassigned fund balance to finalize the tax rate. That would leave us with unassigned fund balance at just over $5 million, which is 14.35%, which we have talked about earlier in the budget process, is important to make sure that we have unassigned fund balance available to demonstrate to voters to buy down a portion of the warrant articles for 2024. And so, yes, with a motion of the select board of using that unassigned fund balance, we're looking to set the tax rate, which would result in a municipal tax rate of $2.66, which remains a fractional portion of the overall tax rate of $16.69.
I would like to make a motion to authorize the utilization of the $747,000 from unassigned fund balance to reduce taxes, which will result in a 2023 tax rate of $16.69 and a municipal tax rate of $2.66.
A second.
Second.
Hardikoff, aye.
But I had a question before we do that. Does that also bring down the school's proportion too? The rest of the tax bill? This reduces the tax bill or just the municipal portion of the tax?
This includes local and state education in that figure.
All of the above are true. So for the rate is obviously a aggregation of all the individual subdivisions, the local school, the state school, the county, and the town.
Right.
The town's use of unassigned fund balance reduces the municipal portion So if we didn't use any unassigned fund balance, the municipal tax rate would be $3 or something. Using 747,000, we're bringing that down to 266, which in turn brings the whole rate down, but the rates for the school and the county are unchanged. Interestingly, and maybe you can ask at the next school board meeting, so you'll remember that the school held a special district meeting to utilize the 133,000. So when I saw that, I anticipated that the school would be using next to nothing from surplus to buy down the tax rate. Usually it's anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000. And if they had surplus, they could have, my understanding is just use that instead of doing the special school district meeting. I saw in the tax rate setting documents that they used $300,000 from surplus to buy down the taxes. They have to by statute. They can't keep an unassigned fund balance in the same way that we can. And so I wonder why they didn't use that surplus instead of holding the special school district meeting.
They meet tomorrow, probably, and they're gonna present their budget line items.
Okay.
There was an overpayment to the school system that was coming back to our fund balance, right? Is that in this or the next year?
All separate and all rectified, right? Yeah, so that was done at the close of the school district fiscal year in June.
Have you been able to guesstimate the 2024 fund balance?
So I have, and it's in your budget binder. May I borrow? The unassigned fund balance chapter is chapter 6, and the first page says projected unassigned fund balance. And on the second page of that document, so maybe not in that document, but on the spreadsheet,
It's there.
that is not so colorful.
Yeah.
The $300,000, so at the end of 2022, you see $300,000 amount to be added to unassigned fund balance. Oh, this is last year's budget binder, Joyce.
Right.
That's why I'm talking, the word.
Oh,
Numbers
you
not in
know.
there? Okay.
I picked up the wrong one.
I think you did.
I came with planning
24.
board folder and this.
5398.
Okay. So in the targeted fund balance, unassigned fund balance history, on the bottom right, you'll see that in 2023, we anticipate $300,000 to be added to unassigned fund balance. That's to answer your question.
So-
That number will be updated, and I anticipate that it'll be updated up.
When we look at rising costs and we save the fund balance now to lower the tax rate now when the budget was actually better, right? That will then make it look like when the tax rate may go up with a higher budget and less fund balance as a bigger jump in that. Whereas if we took some of this fund balance, saved it for 24, that might buffer and make that difference less noticeable. Or
Absolutely.
easier to accommodate.
More palatable.
So
It would make
it's an
it more
excellent point,
palatable.
and I think what you're basically saying is that because we have a revaluation this year and the tax rate is going down, we could use less unassigned fund balance, and it wouldn't seem that the tax rate is going up as much. In different words.
Well, whereas the tax rate's probably going to go up because of added spending
Appropriation
needs in the coming year, then all of a sudden have more spending plus the risk of a tax rate that's not as favorable. It's just a bigger.
I will tell you that this conversation is the reason that I have previously and many other administrators and managers across the state advocate strongly against even using $1 of unassigned fund balance to buy down the taxes.
Mhm.
Because it is a logical next step to do exactly what you're talking about. And to start trying to play trying to utilize it in the most productive way. Because the problem is, and this is why you asked the question, I know it is, You never know how much you're gonna end up with an unassigned fund balance. And if you commit to using a portion in a year and you don't have a similar portion the next year, now you're first making up that difference and any increases that you have. And so the way the town did it before in funding warrant articles, that was a known quantity, and the voters made that decision and it was done. And it was a ballot initiative every single year. The way the select board did it this year was a marriage of those two ideas, because we're saying, no, we're gonna fund a portion of those warrant articles that we presumably would have funded that way anyways. And so that is less risky, but once you start looking at trying to achieve objectives of stabilizing a tax rate, using unassigned fund balance, and projecting, future use of unassigned fund balance, it can have the adverse effect in the next year, however long you're planning out. The very next year, you could have to make up all of that difference. So instead of using 747 this year, maybe we use 300,000 and plan to use $1 million next year because we have increases. Well, we're building on all those increases from next year in 2025. And we're not going to have another $1 million to use in 2025. So we're going to have to make up the distance that we bought down in 2024 in 2025, plus any of the 2025 increases. I'm not describing it probably.
No, I definitely see that. It just seems though that there could be some happy medium where there is a way to have that rainy day account, that a buffer that can be utilized when something does be more extreme.
We'll just run a higher percentage of unassigned fund balance, which is what we did in the past, right? At like 17%, and then we needed to spend it down.
No,
It works.
Town hall.
It works for one-time appropriations. It doesn't work for regular appropriations, because regular appropriations generally build on each other. And the point about the town hall is a perfect example. We let it build up to 17%, and then as a one-time appropriation, we bought that back down to 12.5% using $1,025,000. What that did is doesn't have an impact the next year, because we weren't asking for a town hall the next year. So that plan would work if we knew that there were one-time appropriations. Most of our appropriations are capital reserve contributions, which we're asking for a similar amount every year. I didn't mean to cut you off, Dana.
No, the fact is, we still have 15%. We've really been shooting in the past for 12.5.
Right.
It's just when you bring it down to 12.5. But you and I have had this discussion before.
There isn't a perfect way. I just see communities go awry in utilizing their unassigned fund balance and heading down what I'll call that slippery slope, where now they're, 11.5% would be okay, because we need to kind of make up that difference. Otherwise, we're going to have a one-time jump in a tax rate and they won't pass our budget the next year. And having a good fund balance policy, having a commitment to regularity, which the select board has maintained that commitment to regularity, although doing it in a little bit of a different way, proves the most productive long game of utilization of unassigned fund balance. Select Person Hardikoff, you spent 8 sessions going through the Municipal Association's financial certificate program. What did you hear?
So the recommendation was that, as Connor's describing, that you don't rely on unassigned fund balance to buy down the tax rate each year, because it begins to project to your residents, first of all, that, they potentially have been overtaxed, as opposed to the fact that you've been fiscally conservative with the budget, because it's the voters' budget. So hovering around 12.5 continually and keeping a stable tax rate is something over the past 5 to 6 years that we've seen, which has been extremely helpful.
So buying down the tax rate is what we're doing though, which not recommended?
So
It isn't.
It is not
Plain
recommended.
and simple.
And it shouldn't become an every year practice. I also, and I don't know why this is stuck in my head, but we've just raised valuations to actual 100% selling prices right now. And we are starting to see already with the rise in interest rates, the market is cooling slightly. And I think if I've got this right, the average median sale price just dropped $32,000 in a month. So I think we need to be mindful of that as we're approaching this. This may be the one year that you do want to do this because of the increase. I don't know, but it does. I don't know how it's going to sit with residents. I don't know.
Well, I think the way the select board approached it this year was that during warrant development last year, we said we have $688,575 available that we would otherwise be funding warrant article capital reserve contributions from. And so we're earmarking those funds now, a year in advance essentially, and we'll let the voters decide the whole slate, and then we'll use that much or about that much to buy on the tax. And you have a plan, you're evaluating it a year in advance, so you're not waiting to see what you have and then just using it. And so there is less long-term instability. And again, you're not using it to buy down the operating budget, although money's fungible, but you're saying voters approved, what was it, 970 something thousand of additional appropriations, and you're paying for 747,000 of those from unassigned fund balance.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and rationale was that we're going to show, taxpayers are going to be shown what they're paying, basically.
Well, they're deciding on what they're paying
Well,
for,
I mean,
basically, right?
well,
I mean,
that's
that's the
what
gist of it. It's the voters' budget, so.
Yeah, but when you, in some ways you hiding that a little bit by saying it all comes with no impact to the tax. Sounds wrong. You're saying this warrant article will not add to your tax bill because you're going to use last year's funds. But
Well, this year it won't. I
well,
mean,
no, and
yeah.
that's what we decided though last.
Mm-hmm.
That was what we worked on that budget was to break that up.
And so Scott Shepherd, our esteemed vice chair of the budget committee, sent me a note, which I don't think I've responded to in earnest, but making that point, I could describe it. I could just let him describe it. But basically that even the way we did it this year in saying up front that we plan to use $688,575 to buy down the taxes, a portion of these warrant articles that you approve, still doesn't accomplish the goal of presenting voters a perfectly open and transparent way to say, this is the tax rate impact of what I'm deciding. Because when they closed the curtain in March, they added up all the tax rate impacts, and it said that the tax rate was going to go up 48 cents. And guess what? It didn't, because, well, one, we had a revaluation, and two, the town select board is about to decide to use a portion of unassigned fund balance to buy down the taxes. Basically what you said. And it's
Buy
true.
down the expected capital savings.
Yeah, it's true. And I don't think that there's a perfect way to do it. I don't think it's perfect the way we did it before. I don't think it's perfect the way we did it this year. I think we should probably try to be consistent one way or the other, and definitely have a long-range plan for any utilization of unassigned fund balance, whether it be to fund warrant articles or to buy down the taxes, so that we eliminate the opportunity for invariabilities.
You got a motion out there.
Hang on, there is a suggestion at the training sessions for finances that you actually write a policy in relation to this.
And we have.
And
a
I don't
fund
know
balance
if you
policy.
truly can do that and
Wonder.
still grow your infrastructure. And I don't know if you truly can. Of all the municipalities sitting in that room, Barrington had what I consider, because we pulled up examples of 8 different municipalities, we had the most stable tax rate.
And that was before
we started paying down the taxes.
It's only took.
Year over year. There's a program that we were all introduced to, and we started playing with our different municipalities and the tax rate in comparison to all of the other municipalities in the state.
Didn't our warrants exceed the amount we had?
Yes.
So,
So-
so one of the issues was, which of these do we fund from fund balance and which do these are
Are
directly?
we at
taxed?
15% right now, Connor?
We're 15 now.
We're over 15 without any utilization. With the utilization, we would go down to 14.35, which I say in my TA report, that would leave about 680,000
Mm-hmm.
of surplus unassigned fund balance, which we could commit to voters to fund a portion of the warrant articles for 2024 if we wanted to do it the same way. And we will rely on our budget committee vice chair to help us package that up in a way that more
With a blank
accurately,
check.
Yeah, I mean, there's
more
a-
accurately
yeah, it's a
demonstrates the
lot.
tax rate impact.
Yeah.
Get a motion out there.
What was your motion,
Call the
Mr.
question.
Sakosha, to approve the 16.69 as well as
Yeah.
utilize
It was
the unassigned fund balance?
We
for
did say
those?
publicly to the voters. Right?
That we would.
Yeah.
This is, as he looks back up his motion, you can see from 2002 to 2011, the town consistently used hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy down the taxes. And you can also see
Terrible,
the
terrible.
balance of unassigned fund balance. We were down to $582,000 at one point, which is grossly underfunded. I'm sure they probably had a tax anticipation note because they didn't have cash flow at the time.
Now, understand too, any future bonds that this town takes on is impacted by how well you have maintained the consistent unassigned fund balance percentage. And so it's a huge factor in our borrowing power as we build infrastructure too. And all of this I learned sitting in a classroom at New Hampshire Municipal Association.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the utilization of $747,000 from the unsigned fund balance to reduce the taxes, which will result in a 2023 tax rate of $16.69 and a municipal tax rate of $2.66.
Did that once. Two.
Maybe.
And a second.
Roll call.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gibson, aye.
And Shrek, aye.
Scotia, aye.
Capello, aye. So I guess that motion has carried. You know, do we want to talk about this in general? In the future?
Here's what I'll say. The budget committee tomorrow night is going to take a deep dive into unassigned fund balance. And I will share this preliminary conversation from the select board and encourage them to maybe make a recommendation to the select board moving forward. So maybe reserve future conversation until after some input from the budget committee.
Beautiful.
All right.
Probably tonight's not.
I think we also, we need to consider some projections, and I don't know how you can go about that, but you are about to add 174 housing, whether it's apartments or individual homes, 174 units of housing. And that means that much more in your taxation on cars as people are registering cars. And your growth is going to continue to impact you in this way. And I don't know how you project that, but it's something that we need to be mindful of.
Right, and it also increases use of services. More calls, more
Yeah,
road
and
work.
we've done it, I think, looking at the number of FTEs that have been added to the fire or police or what have you, you're creating a level of service that's not declining as people are increasing, but you're also not going overboard and just not being mindful of taxation, so. In my humble opinion, by the way.
Excellent.
All right, so to be continued. Public comment, I assume there's no public comment in the building? Oh, you do? Okay.
You don't have to read it.
Okay.
It's late.
Name and address, sir.
Scott Shepherd, 97 Birch Lane. It's been, so I'm talking without my ABC hat on, personal. In the last meeting at the ABC we had, it struck me that we had the recreation, the library talking to us. It struck me that this was huge, right? It wasn't just the library. It wasn't just a rec center. There's a synergy between them. And it is, to me, a step change. What was interesting as I thought about it and reflected over it this year or this week, is that really it's not a fire engine, it's investing in ourselves, right? And so we talk about it as infrastructure, but it's not. It's really investing in ourselves and what our community is. To me, it's as much of a community decision as much as anything else. And so, you know, I started to have this discussion with you last night or last week over email. It really gets to me down to the master plan, right? What is the vision for this town going forward? And actually just in hearing this, you know, the presentation, the arrows and everything about all the different options for the library and rec center is important, but I think most people would see that and their eyes will glaze over. They'll have choices that they really don't understand how to make. And that's where having a vision comes in play, because it helps people align people and say, this is where we're going. I'm going to trust you all to know that this is the best way to get there. And so we have the master plan, but I don't actually ever hear it being talked about. And actually, even beyond that, you all made a decision to give money away to try to protect our groundwater, right? That to me falls under the master plan, right? If you go back to 2017, there's actually talk about them. That's about moderating growth, right? And so to me, I'd love to see more of a discussion and more of a guiding sort of view that the master plan really has to factor into what we're talking about. So at the ABC, final thing I'll say is we're talking about the Richardson Dam. Well, do you just knock it down and say, well, we'll let it go back to where it was before? Do you want to have maintain the water there? And there are various ways to look at this, but to me, if I go back to the master plan, my understanding of it is people want to maintain the beauty. And for a lot of people, Richardson's Dam is beautiful. So while the budget committee is focusing almost exclusively on dollars, today's dollars, tomorrow's dollars, really the master plan is just as important because that reflects what everybody wants. So I'd love to see more of that factored in as we make our decisions.
That's a good reminder, because we talked about that at our strategic planning and then kind of let that drop.
That is a good reminder. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is there any public comment online?
Didn't we talk about bringing up our strategic planning as a review periodically
Yeah.
at
December,
meetings?
yeah, I think
Kinda
we
keep that fresh.
targeted the December 11th meeting.
That was,
Mm.
yeah,
Check my
that was
notes.
very helpful.
So no public comment online?
Nope.
All right, so moving along, I skipped select board member reports and concerns. Does anyone have reports for the past week?
I do not.
A lot of it was already covered. I mean, the library committee, they talked about the new library. You heard from conservation about the Dudzik property for the water district. And on the energy committee, we've already heard about the public hearing. The next one will be on November 27th. With the energy committee, the public hearing sessions on the community power, it's really important to get the understanding out there, because like the TIF district, a lot of people might not understand it, or there could be misinformation. And really, at the end of the day, this is an opportunity for, based on some calculations extrapolated over a year, the Barrington community of residents could save collectively hundreds of thousands of dollars that stays within the community, within our residents' pockets, just by having a different source for their energy. So the good opportunity that we want to make sure the word gets out to support.
And you've heard the ABC, you heard the library. I would like guidance from people. Last time, I didn't go to the school board meeting because the ABC lasted 7:30. So I'd like guidance here, because tomorrow the ABC meets at 4:30, board meets at 5:30, and they're going to have laying out their budget line. It's going to be tough to make both, although I would suggest that I attend the part about the, I'll come to both, but I should leave early or not. appreciate guidance from the rest of the board.
Yeah, you're our only rep there where we have both you and Connor at ABC.
Good point.
right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'll come at 4:30 just to hear that first part of that discussion too. But not yet. See, I think they have now. Yeah, they didn't have initially, and I think they're talking about inaugurating someone tomorrow, so I assume there is someone soon.
Is it really?
Only applicant.
They're gonna interview that person tomorrow at 5:30, I think.
Great.
The only quick update I have for you guys is there's just some final touches on the Class 6 private road, and Ron's been out with knee surgery, so we're just kind of waiting for him to get back into gear and get it shortly.
Great, great. Looking forward to that. All right, I don't have anything to bring to the table, so we don't need non-public tonight. Is that
Correct.
correct? All right, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Give us that.
Yeah,
I guess so. Koshai.
Capello, aye. Meeting adjourned.
Okay.